Hello, welcome to another episode of Essential Esports. This time, we're going to be talking about the Overwatch League, my favorite esports property, and these gentlemen's favorite esports property as well. I actually put them in the wrong boxes, so I'm going to go ahead and fix that real quick.
Which box am I in?
You're in the Avast box. I do like how your salmon-colored T-shirt did make me think that you were just going to be topless on this stream at the start, so I am slightly disappointed in that.
Gotta apply the thirst trap. That's how you get the views. As I've learned since then. You gotta get views any way you can. See, we have Harsha, so we have a very nice, appealing young man in front of us, and now we have a salmon-colored T-shirt.
Gotta get views any way you can. Very appropriate for our Overwatch League topic today. I see what you're doing there. Very, very clever. Very clever, Avast. So we have Harsha, who's the coach of the Houston Outlaws, and former coach of the Vancouver Titans, none of his players exist there anymore. They've all scattered to the four corners of the earth. Packing10, who is the coach of the Los Angeles Valiant, and Avast, who played one game of Overwatch League?
Zero.
Preseason game, technically. I did more than Joe Meister, okay? I did more than Joe Meister. That's my placard in the Overwatch League Hall of Fame. Did more than Joe Meister.
Better than Joe Meister. Beautiful. Who is a content creator for Envy. But there's been a lot of movement this season on the format. So the purpose of the show is to talk mostly about industry issues. So we're not going to get into the actual games, but considering we have two coaches and a well-versed content creator and streamer here, it's going to be really interesting to talk about the formats and what's changed and how this is affecting the way that the professional game is played, because this is something that can really, I think, echo out across all other esports. It's an interesting topic to talk about how these things actually form when and affect competition. So let's start with the fact that hero pools exist. Even though we did not see hero pools this last weekend, the heroes were all unleashed. They were unchained, and you could play Mei and Orisa, which everybody loves to see as much as you wanted. For the most part, for those of you who don't know, Blizzard has been implementing a hero pool system, which means that instead of doing a pick ban like you might see in a MOBA, they are selecting 4 heroes, sometimes disastrously, from the ladder instead of the professional scene. Though we have fixed that now, right? Now it's being selected according to what is played in the Overwatch League. So they started by saying, sorry, it's going to be a long-winded explanation because this is very odd, honestly. And
it's
very
gone through like 5 different iterations.
Yeah, it's also gone through 10 different iterations. So the initial iteration was, we are going to ban 4 heroes for a week, and these heroes are going to be the most popular heroes on the competitive ladder.
Sort of. Because it was still random.
It was still random, but it was weighted towards the most popular heroes, which means that they were really just banning what the plebs like to play. Right. And in my experience of video gaming, you don't remove the features from your game that the plebs enjoy, because then no one plays your game. That's just a personal thought that I have. And also, it didn't solve any of the really shitty problems of the Overwatch League, because obviously, like in most games, the professional meta and the casual meta are 2 very different things. So we've gone through some rocky road in terms of the hero pool to where we are now, which is that hero pools exist based on still the random factor, but they are Grandmaster and up only, right? Correct?
Yes, but then they're also influenced by the picks in Overwatch League. So the Grandmaster hero pools are based off the Overwatch League usage.
It's masters and up, right? So sorry, masters and grandmasters, correct? And
I think it's only Grandmaster, actually.
Only GM now.
Only GM now. Okay, so that's changed also, right? It was masters at one point in time. Am I correct?
It was.
Okay, see, I can't even keep up with how crazy
There's been like 8 iterations. Every day you show up and there's a new rule book on your desk. It's like, wow, that's looking good.
Okay, so where we are now after all of this is that at only the top rank of the ladder do hero pools exist. So the plebs can now play whatever they want, which is how it should be. And we also have those Grandmaster hero pools selected due to use in the Overwatch League. So we're going to start with hero pools because hero pools are going to affect the tournament structure that they're going into and when and hero pools are and are not used. So let's talk about hero pools first. Now, my thought on hero pools is let's start with why they were existing in the first place. Because the devs actually just can't figure out a way to balance the game at the highest level to the degree that if you were not watching Overwatch League last year, because you can have mirror compositions, we ended up with a triple tank, triple support meta that lasted most of the last season. And while some people, like myself, found that interesting, after a while it did get kind of boring. And even though without changes, Shanghai Dragons were kind of breaking it by the end, it's kind of true that in Overwatch, you get a lot of mirror comps if all heroes are available, and there's sort of an ideal or fixed way to play the game. So with that in mind, well, first off, do you agree with that statement? Do you agree that Overwatch will trend into that direction?
I think if you give Overwatch, like, if you give each patch a few weeks to, like, sit and, like, develop, then teams generally, like, tend to, like, pick mirror comps. I mean, GOATS was ridiculous because that was just like 9+ months of just the same exact like patch with minimal changes. But like in general, like you'll trend to mirror comps. But I think that, I mean, that's how it used to work, right? But now it's like we have a new thing every week, and so it's just like very random what people are playing, I feel like.
Do people know what goats are, by the way, on this channel? I feel like a lot of the
triple
fans
tank, triple supports. Yes, people will know.
Okay.
It's the goats is the meta that we're talking about that lasted forever.
I feel like we have a lot of people that have never consumed and vehemently are like, damn you, Overwatch League, sometimes on this channel. So they wouldn't even know. Packing, what you haven't said anything, Packing, and I know there's a lot of, it takes a while for the thoughts to cross that massive forehead, but let's hear it.
It takes a long time for it to get from one ear to the other, right? But I don't know. Like, I actually think that like the hero pool system is like holistically is like good for long term for the game, because all it does is it forced teams to be more creative. It forced coaching staffs to be more creative, and really like even like this week when hero bans were taken away, teams were playing a bunch of different stuff. Like all the teams had to play dive at some point. They have to play spam. They have to play brawl. They have to play poke. Like they have to play all these different archetypes of comps, and like now you actually get to see that. Whereas, you know, with the no ban system, you know, it's more about, hey, like, you know, everybody generally knows how to play the comp at a very, you know, similar level, but who understands the micro better, and can you get people into, you know, these nuancy situations and put them in better situations, which there is a lot of coaching impact in that, right? Whereas this year it's a little bit different. Because it's more about fundamentals and archetypes, but I actually think it's better long term. So
I think that I agree that actually hero pools are not they're not like necessarily bad for the game. I actually like that they exist, and I feel like that
very opposite to your assistant coach, Harsha. Very opposite.
Yeah,
to what Dream said.
I'm aware, but I personally feel like they're actually good for the game. But I think that the implementation has been really weird or every single implementation has been pretty weird, I think, to the point where, like last week, for example, most teams had like 3 days maximum to prepare for, you know, a ridiculous amount of maps with a ridiculous amount of comps, to the point where like people were just playing sometimes like there are a few teams that were just one-tricking comps because they figured they'll get better like one-tricking a comp rather than like playing different stuff like Packing was mentioning earlier. So I think the idea is actually fine that you're forcing teams to be very like diverse and adapt, but I think that the way they're implemented is kind of ridiculous in terms of like the burden it puts on teams and like how many different scenarios they have to prepare for. And obviously you want like players to think on their feet all the time, but I feel like it's a bit too much with like the current implementation of hero pools.
So to put this in perspective, when hero pools were first started being discussed as an option last season, I spoke to the league about them, and the idea at the time was to implement them monthly, which you have to understand that we're never gonna fix the issue in Overwatch, which is that the devs have a very difficult time balancing this game. And I don't think it's because the devs are stupid or anything like that. I think that there is Overwatch is unique in that there is more of a gulf between the professional scene and the casual scene than most other esports have. So it's really, really hard to balance the game for both ends of the spectrum. And so in an absence of that, I actually think that the Grandmaster and above and aligning it to Overwatch League is actually a really good solution. And I think that it allows like the variety that you're talking about. But weekly, so when I came in, my perception of it was I had heard about monthly hero pools, and I was like, I don't know, that doesn't sound too bad, right? I was like, that's an interesting thought, because you want the ability to develop the meta. But what Overwatch has as a problem at the professional level is that when you, as Harsha alluded to, when you have so many maps and you have this constantly shifting hero pool on those maps, there's not a lot of time to actually refine your strategies, right? And it's also hard to build a roster. We're going to get into the roster stuff in a second because that was a different complaint. But from a coaching perspective, how has it been when, like, how do you approach this situation where you have this ever-shifting pool of maps and this ever-shifting random pool of heroes? Do you actually feel like you get to develop strategies, or are you trying to train your players in a different way?
We took a completely different approach once we heard about it. Last year we were, like so regimented and structured on the point of, having a lot of we would do 3 scrims, multiple days a week. We'd do tons and tons of review, a lot of player one-on-ones and group reviews, and we had about 7-8 different styles of reviews that we would do. And this year we kind of took like a step back from that, and we said, as soon as they announced the hero pools, that we wanted to fundamentally understand like how to play all these comps at like a macro level, and the heroes didn't matter. So we put a large emphasis on just understanding the game and understanding how things should work, and theoretically, and then just plugging and placing. And I mean, it's worked really well for us this year.
And that meant less practice time, right? Packing, you're working smarter, not harder, which I feel like is a big problem for coaches in the Overwatch League, is they want to work harder and not smarter to solve problems, which is I don't think the right solution.
Yeah, we cut our practice schedule down. I mean, probably 15 hours a week, less at least. Less scrims, less review time. More holistic discussions. When we play in our in our scrims and everything, like there's focus to improve on certain archetypes and different things, and then we really feel comfortable at any point if we play against a team. I mean, it's happened multiple times this year that we played against a team. We played against Atlanta, and they ran something that we didn't really know or see, and behind the scenes we're just talking about, hey, listen, what small changes do we need to make? Like how do we get them this to shift to a different archetype and make them swap? Because a lot of these teams, at least from my perspective, when I hear them talk about how they're practicing and how they're viewing scrims and growth and development, it's they're trying to keep things the same as last year, and they're putting a lot more effort into like, hey, we need the best strategy, when right now I don't think the best strategy is what wins you the games. It's having good fundamentals, having good mid fight, having good post positioning, stuff like that. So
I would agree with that. I think that the one I think that that's generally right. I think that the one weird instance of that though is that the way that the meta works is that because certain heroes are banned every week, you kind of get this sort of ping-ponging of comps. It was kind of worse when a while back when Widow and McCree were getting banned every other week. And that obviously just made it way worse. But now when certain tanks are banned, so for example, when Ryan is banned, you're either going to see dive or the slow poke comps, right? Or when Orisa is banned, you're just going to see Ryan rush comps or dive. It's you're refining, teams are just refining comps that they've practiced before in the past, and they're kind of not relearning to some degree, but they need to kind of refresh themselves on comps, but then they can get deeper into the strategy. So I think that when you're playing a comp for the first time, you want to fundamentally understand it, but then as hero pools move on and on, people can push those comps further to some degree. So let's say Philly, for example, is a team that's really, really good at the Ryan May kind of style of comps. And I think that they've gotten that good because they keep every time that's available, they keep picking that kind of style and then refining it. And it's it's sort of weird because you've seen teams like develop their own styles. So like for example, Shock is really good at the Orisa Sigma, like the pokey style, and they've kind of pushed that further than other teams. And then like I said, Philly, they've played a lot of the Rhine style. And then both of those teams played their own style in the no hero pool, or the no hero pool tournament. And like I think that they both played them really well, but they've like pushed those styles further than they, I guess, would have if they hadn't been playing them like earlier in the season. It's kind of like an interesting dynamic where I think it's not like good or bad. It's just like interesting how it's worked out, where teams are not playing to their strengths and then they're like able to review against a bunch of other different styles. I think that it's a really like cool thing that's developed out of hero pools.
It really makes me happy to hear that the Houston Outlaws are developing their own style, by the way. That just makes me so thrilled that somebody's learned that lesson. Anyway, but I do think
Harsha wasn't part of that.
I know. Harsha never had any of these issues. He understood the whole time. He was the GOAT's lord.
To be fair, I think at the beginning of the season that was Houston's actual issue again. Like we did. I mean, I didn't experience Houston last year, so we kind of like tried to force a square peg into like a round hole. But I think we've also learned from that as well. So my bad too.
Everybody gets caught in that trap, right? Because it's one of those incredibly difficult things about coaching, where you're trying to figure out whether you should coach to the best possible way of playing or to the ideal way of playing for your players, and even discovering that ideal way is very hard. Sorry, Avast, what were you going to chime in on?
I mean, it was literally just going to be. I think that's Harsha talked about the evolution of teams, and I feel like we've seen a direct shift as well. And also once again, I don't want to keep nitpicking Dream because sometimes it's too easy. I look at his Twitter profile and I'm like, what is he doing? Like, come on, bro. Like it's like you, Monte, on Twitter sometimes. You get people all riled up, you know? But for you, it's often indirectly.
Dream's an amateur, though. Dream's an amateur.
He's not nearly as good at getting the peasants all angry, you know? Rallying outside the castle with the torches and pitchforks. He's not nearly as good.
The funny thing is I'm just in the castle. They could never get in.
That is the best part about it.
Take the bridge. Pull the drawbridge.
But I think coaches and players and analysts and everyone have really, some people came in, I think, and some people came in and be like, okay, like I think hero pools are great, but there's downsides. Other people came in and was like, hero pools are the devil incarnate and Jeff Kaplan has stolen everything from me and I'm tired of this man. But it's clear that there are positives in terms of forcing teams to have to play other comps, you know? And it sucks. It really does suck. And also, I think it leads to the point that I brought up earlier, how a lot of coaches feel like they want to work harder. Like, for example, even good teams like Shock triple blocks a lot. And triple blocking obviously means you're playing 3 scrim blocks a day. And other teams try to do that where they're playing like 6 to 8 hours of scrims and then trying to do other things, which is insane to me. I think eventually that leads to a breaking point. And we have seen an evolution of coaching more over with packing style that he brought today, and other teams have adopted, or not adopted, but they've also mirrored, in that we should be working way smarter. Like I think there are a lot of net positives of forcing teams to have to be like, I guess we have to not just mindlessly run our heads into the wall with a meta, and we have to sort of think beyond that. But also, when Blizzard throws out 8 different iterations of hero pools and it changes
and
every week like a blitzkrieg, and you're like, all the coaches are like hooked up on IVs trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. Like it's impossible.
So I think like the distress that I heard from many coaches at the start of this season was completely justified. Like honestly, if I was a coach of an Overwatch League team and I had been thrown this curveball, I don't know what the fuck I would have done. Like I would just been like, fuck this shit, and walked away probably. Well,
the thing is, like,
up to the IV, that's what you do, right? Yeah.
People also like built their rosters on like an entirely different game model, basically.
Yes.
Going into the season.
Yeah, let's get to that. So this is the problem. So the biggest problem that I had with the shift is, okay, so we can accept that the weekly hero pools are happening or whatever, right? But the problem is that if you look at the history of Overwatch, professional Overwatch, is that it has been incredibly difficult to build a roster, because when you have a competition, you have to first, at its most basic level, understand what you are testing for, because it is a test to see who is the best at something. And when in the last 2 years, we have seen, so for those people who don't know, the implementation of what's called the 2-2-2 lock, which means that you can only, the heroes are divided in different categories, tank, damage, and support. You can only have 2 tanks, 2 damage, and 2 support on a map at any given time. So you must have 2 of each, and you can only have 2. You can't switch that. So it's designed to like break the GOATS meta. Also designed to make laddering a more pleasant experience for people who didn't want to end up in games with 5 damage characters, 1 tank, and no healing. So it was just shitty to play the game, basically, even at a casual level. So with that in mind, the problem that you're running into is that when Overwatch League tells you we're implementing this, and you as a team go out and you say, okay, well now I know the players that we need. Maybe we need 4 damage players because there's hit scan versus projectile heroes, there's different specialties. But at a fundamental level, we kind of know, like, if I have a guy who's like super good at this one hero that's constantly in the meta, or super good at like hit scan, like McCree, Widowmaker, this kind of stuff, well, I'll just rotate him in whenever he's necessary. Now, the problem with hero pools is because they are random and because they're changing every week. The teams were signing specialists, but the actual thing you were testing for in the league is not who can refine a strategy and who can really have a laser focus on a certain kind of composition or switch players in order to affect a strategy. 2, who can play the most heroes and who is the most flexible in game because you're not going to have time to develop strategies. So that is the core issue with the weekly hero pools, is that you have literally changed the fundamental thing you are testing for in the Overwatch League, which instead of being refined at one strategy is now can flex between any strategy. That is the issue, okay? If from the beginning of Overwatch League, we had said, we are trying to see the most flexible team, and we had been testing for that the whole time, this really wouldn't be as big of a deal. But the problem is this was dropped on the teams after they had signed all their player contracts, which then is also horrific for the specialist players who have been told by Overwatch League for years, oh, you can just play McCree all the time if you're Pine, right? Now we don't have Pine. Life sucks, right? And now we have DPS players who are leaving for other games. So in a nutshell, that was my issue, is like I felt that the teams and the players themselves got screwed by this shift because Overwatch League itself has no philosophy around what the competitive scene should be or what the core value of that competition, whether it's strategy or flexibility, is. Thoughts?
It's also happened 3 different times now. 3 different times, 3 different shifts. 2 of them technically weren't artificially induced, but like we have this year with hero pools and everyone's like, shit, I have to throw my entire roster ideology. Last year with GOATs, we had quite possibly one of the worst teams ever made in the league with the Washington Justice, which was entirely not built upon a GOATs meta, because it just never got patched out. And then the first year, we had Moth meta, where the staple of the game of Overwatch, Lucio, was then suddenly replaced by Mercy, which most main supports didn't play, and or at least not extensively. And so we've had 3 different meta changes that have holistically destroyed roster building attempts at the beginning of the season now. So at this point, I'm like, I don't even know how. It's just a rush. It's like Russian roulette with just like what is Blizzard going to throw at us this year to like change it up? Or I guess this case I would say it's not even Blizzard. It's like hero pools are probably a conjunction thing, but I always was under the opinion that for hero pools, we're putting in usage so we can balance the game around the usage, so we can adjust these heroes as heroes are used more or whatever. Like I always thought that was that was the point of it, and it seems like that hasn't really been targeted at all. So I'm still just like, what the hell's happening? I don't know. Good luck, coaches and GMs. Good luck.
It's horrible. It has a knock-on effect too, because it's not just that this process makes GM and coaches die inside. It's that when we have players like Pine who are superstars of the league and have some of the best narrative around them, well, all of a sudden we just lose these guys because we basically just like patched them out of the game, right? It's not that Pine sucked. It's that Pine is not useful in a hero pool world.
This is kind of tangential, but also related. Like just because you mentioned Pine, like think about hit scan specialists now is that like 1 week they'll be playing every game, and then all of a sudden McCree and Widow are banned, and maybe Ashe won't be like that good in whatever meta it is, and then all of a sudden they can neither play scrims and they can't play ranked either. So like what do? They just go play Valorant. Like like for example, if we have a week where we just want to hard grind like Tracer Echo Dive, that means probably Blase and Dante are going to be playing our match, and that means that Linkser like won't be playing scrims that often. That means that he can't play ranked because his heroes aren't enabled in ranked, and then he can't play like scrims, so like he doesn't have anything to do. So that's like another.
That's actually pretty bad. I hadn't even thought about that.
It's like another thing where like the implementation of hero pools just feels like you can't win in it. Like there's always going to be something wrong with it in terms of like the pros like will always just have an issue. I don't know like what fix you could add into the game that would like.
Well, they are having a 2-2-2 like unlocked queue, right? So in theory, depending on the popularity of that, if also the hero bans, to be fair, we don't know if the hero bans are being put into that or not, at least not that I'm aware. I haven't heard that information. But there is going to be that open queue. And like ignoring like Pine, the point is that star players, you want to keep them in the league. And when you change the conditions of what it means to be a star player from specialist to generalist, then you're going to lose a lot. So I'm hoping that this is the direction, or like, it doesn't matter what the direction is. It just matters that a direction exists for the competitive scene, so that players, you can get the right players, so the players are happy, so the players can continue to become stars in the Overwatch League and not just retire or move on to other games. And also so the GMs and coaches, we can see better strategies and that they can make intelligent choices, because as of the start of this season, and it has, I think, settled down, but it just seemed like a giant crapshoot in terms of who was going to be good or not.
Yeah, I think to kind of go back a little bit, obviously last year I was actually a little bit pissed when they put in the 2-2-2 lock. Obviously I took over, in stage 2, we turned things around. We really found our own style. We started playing Sombra Goats and triple DPS around the same time that Shanghai was doing it, and we had a lot of success with it, and we like rolled through stage 3. We made semis in stage 3, and we were like on like a really good trajectory to make it back in the playoffs, even having like an 0-8 start. And then they slapped a 2-2-2 on us, and kind of hurt us a lot because we had to start from square one again, in 3/4 of the way through the season. But when it came to roster building for this year, we actually had the approach of, we wanted to find people who were legitimately good at everything, and that's why we decided.
that you ended up with the right approach, right? But who could have known? That's the point. Who could have known? The thing
is, right? Like if you look at it, right? Like we have KSF who. He started as a projectile player. He was a very, very good projectile player. Great Doomfist, great Genji, great Pharah. And he could also, last year he was a superstar on Widowmaker and those other hit scan heroes when he needed to play them. And we picked up KSP, who was he's a superstar on hit scan, who we knew could play projectile heroes too. I think it's an oversight on a lot of teams to go, hey, listen, like the game's not brand new anymore. That there are people who are good at both. There are people who can be superstars at both, and saying like, oh, like a guy like Pine, like, yeah, those players, I think they'd get phased out regardless of hero pools or not, because everybody else just keeps getting better, and these young new talents keep playing more and more heroes and have more and more time to develop. And the kind of old guard is sitting there going, oh well, I'm really good at McCree, Widowmaker, and whatever, Tracer or Soldier 76, and even if it wasn't a hero ban meta, wouldn't you rather a guy who could play Widowmaker at the highest level and Doomfist, rather than just a guy who could play Widowmaker? So
yeah, right. Like, look, I'm not arguing against the current system. In fact, I think that looking at the current system, there's a lot of arguments to be made in favor of what you're saying. The point is that the system we're testing for has changed. So had we been testing for this, had hero pools existed since day one of Overwatch League, we wouldn't be in this problem. The issue is the shift, not that this is not. We can argue that this is better, worse, whatever, right? But the issue is the shift into this meta. And I think to Harsha's point, like, this is going to be even exacerbated by the fact that if it's a month-long hero pool, well, then Linkser can't play hit scan for a month potentially. Like, that's so.
Yeah, I think the argument I'm trying to make is, like, even if there wasn't hero pools, in my opinion,
you say the Pines would be gone.
Yeah, those players just get phased out anyway.
Which I think is a little unfair, though, Packing, if we really think about it, because let's take, for example, like, because of the fact that Blizzard has randomly chosen the roulette board for balancing at times, and it's just like, you know, plinkoed it, and then like where it lands, there's the next hero ban or next hero buffer like nerf.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is that like realistically, if we look back, like let's take for example, I think two obvious examples are Baby Bay and Linkser, and also Carpe, so three obvious examples. Like coming into this season, and we just came out of GOATs, everyone's like, except for actually Baby Bay played okay, but like looking in, it's like, who was it coming into the season realistically? And I know Harsha's the coach of Linkser, so like it's unfair to me to be like, yeah, Linkser fucking blows, right? Like, which is obviously not the case. But if you looked into it, those players performed really poorly. And also going into season 1, where heroes, because of moth meta and because of all the various meta changes, because of the lack of buffs or nerfs to like the hit scan heroes and things like that, Pine didn't get really a lot of chance to play in certain points of season 1. So I feel like they lacked the opportunity to actually grow and improve and get second chances in earlier seasons without those hero pools. So we really don't know, I think, where Pine could be right now, right? Like coming into this season, I was like, damn, I can't believe Tucker has inducted Carpe into the Comcast family tree, right? Like he didn't look that good.
51% of the company.
You know?
Yeah,
like,
he was really bad last year. Like
yeah, and then Baby Bay example, like sure, he wasn't as bad as Carpe, I think at times, but he was really kind of man. Now he's looking fantastic for Atlanta at points. Linkser as well was essentially shunted off to the Shadow Realm, and now whenever he gets to play, he looks great when his heroes are up. So I think it's kind of unfair to automatically assume that every player would be gone. Especially DPS players in particular, just because of the hero pools.
I just think like fundamentally, like it might not be this year. You know, it's like one of those processes where I mean it takes time, right? Like there's obviously gonna be value from guys who are really good at one specific thing, but you know, as time goes on, I just think that you know DPS players are just going to get better. They're not just like they're going to get better on like you know across the board instead of it just being like because a lot like realistically a lot of the case it's like you have like you know you're like Hawkstalls who are just like super specialists on you know on that projectile role, and then you have you know guys like Linkser that are you know great just aimers, right? And I just think like the longer the game comes out and the longer the game's alive, those are going to mold together. And you know maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm wrong, but I mean you look at kids like KSP and Sugar Free and Kevster, like those guys they literally play everything. Like why would you not want one of those guys who's a superstar at everything? Like KSP, like we played him on Echo the past couple weeks, and he's played Echo maybe I don't know 3 hours in scrims, and he's better than a majority of Echoes in the league because he's just very talented. And I think talent is, you know, by nature just better than saying like if you have someone who could be talented at everything, like that's the way things are going to go. And these young kids, I mean, I gave a couple examples of them. They like that's what they do. They play everything, and they just keep getting better and better. And eventually, that's going to be the teams are going to have 4 of those players instead of, you know, 2 like a Hawksall, a Linkser, and then you know 2 players who kind of play everything at an okay level or a slightly above average level.
Well, and it's true in basically every esport that it takes a couple of years of the professional scene getting going before you start to see more, I would say, stable long-term players emerge. That's been a trend in every esport I've ever worked in. Is like you get some guys who have a very high floor initially, who are coming in from other games, who just have like great mechanics, but their ceiling isn't very high in that specific game, so they end up kind of just wandering around from game to game within that genre, whether it's like FPS or MOBA or whatever have you. And then there are very few people who are actually able to survive the first couple of years because, frankly, the kids who grow up playing this game only are specialists in this game, and they just end up being better, like you're saying. So I think that's kind of a natural progression regardless.
Sure, yeah.
Harsha, how do you feel about specialists and repurposing them? Like, since you've been getting some use out of Houston now, since like I talked about, we gave the Linkser example. Now Linkser's actually got into play this year. Do you think there's ever a point where you would see on the opposite side? And obviously, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not saying that packing's wrong either. I tend to agree. I just think that like some players were given an unfair shot. Do you think you could ever repurpose specialists and I guess the both of you, since you're both coaches, obviously, could you ever repurpose a player as a specialist into a new role, or do you think the neural elasticity has worn out? You know, the waistband is stretched too thin at that point, and they're stuck in their ways.
I think so. I don't have any like scientific background to like help me like talk about like, you know, neuroplasticity and stuff like that. But with with like, I would say that there are players that have played this game and they've played it a certain way for like the entire existence of Overwatch, and for it to like for like the paradigm to switch while they're like past like the halfway mark of their careers or whatever it is, I think that probably makes it hard for them. Whereas players like Packing just mentioned, like KSP is like 19, I believe. Kevster, someone you mentioned.
Yeah, they're all really young. They're yeah.
And they're players that got good at like a certain role and then kind of like expanded their role, but they were still really young when they did it. So like I don't think he's wrong at all, and I think that like Overwatch will trend towards that kind of like player where they're really versatile, can like play a bunch of different heroes to like a really high level who don't even fundamentally like play the same. But I just think that in terms of like the league as it is now is not necessarily that way. I do think that that trend will like what Packing mentioned. I think that will become the trend for like the future. But as of now, I think it's hard to expect that of like a lot of the people in the league who, have like fundamentally played Overwatch a different way than it is being played now for its existence.
Yeah, I could agree with that too. And that's what another one I forgot that a kid, he just got picked up by Vancouver Titans, Shockwave. He was on the Contenders team I own. And like earlier this year, I saw him play, and I mean, he was playing freaking Doomfist. McCree. He came out and he like pounded on Echo last weekend. I mean, it's like I mean, it's crazy, like the ability that some of these kids have. But I do agree that like it's I think it's kind of going to be one of those things of like a changing of the guard, like the and I think Monte said it is naturally over time, like stuff like that'll happen. But yeah, I mean, that's what I was very fortunate to be able to be looking for that, at least for roster building for us this year. We took that approach of, hey, we're gonna we're gonna cut the whole roster and we're gonna build something new. And that was one of the things we really looked for, was like long term we want to be successful, even if it's not this year. How can we find people who can develop into being superstars at everything, not just one thing. And it even goes with like tank players, right? There's a lot of these teams. Shock's even one of them that I mean, they play super on Rhine and they play Smurf on everything else, and it works really well for them now. Is that going to hurt them eventually down the road, especially in a hero pool meta? I mean, who knows? I mean, if you have two players who are good enough at that role, like probably not, because it's a very like at-risk role. But it's stuff like that I feel like long term down the road it's going to exploit teams, because if one person's playing, like we said it against Paris this week, I said it in the post show interview, is like we were picking maps to force them to play no smite, because we wanted to play a dive mirror. We didn't play dive at all this week, but we knew we were way better in a dive mirror because our DPS players were just better, and we thought like no smite was really exploitable, so we banned towards that, and it worked out for us, and we made it in the semifinals. Like stuff like that I think is going to be really important. So I don't know.
That makes sense. Every day Brad Rajani manifests it's his face in you more, Packing. I just hear Brad coming out. It's like, I'm going to create a school for kids that shoot things good. Everyone has to be 15 years of age and under. And then we're going to train them to be esports super soldiers. And they're going to play everything. And I just hear the Brad Rajani popping out.
I mean, that's not a bad idea, right? Like that's literally what we already see. I mean, for example, even in Overwatch, like look at what Element Mystic does. They literally have a training academy in Korea.
Yeah.
And so many of those players and coaches have already been picked up by Overwatch League teams. And that's just an Overwatch. If you start thinking about League of Legends in China and think about their like insane academies that they have over there that they've been able to develop players in, it gets really, really crazy very fast. So
yeah, my house, we got three kids coming in now.
That's only half an Overwatch team.
So.
You need 3 more. Come, fill out that roster. Make the most flexible
we're
team.
working on it.
So. Oh Jesus. I can't even imagine. So with that in mind, let's talk about the duration of hero pools, because for me, it's very difficult to have no constants in an esport. If we look at other games, League of Legends, MOBAs, they're on one map. So even though they have an insane number of different characters you can play, you at least have that map constant to work with. In Counter-Strike, you're only dealing with 7 active maps at one time, and also like you don't have characters. Like you have 2 sides that have slightly different, economies and weapons, but also, the map pool is manageable. I think what's tough in Overwatch is that when you combine the hero pool concept with this kind of like shifting strategy, and then you also combine it on a very large number of maps. Is it 13, 12, 13 right now? What's the number?
14.
14.
14.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's even bigger. It becomes very difficult to actually refine strategies in a way that is satisfying to coaches and professional players, in that these people at the top level feel that the best team has won. And fans sometimes like randomness because it is crazy and results in upsets, but competitors don't like that. Nobody, like, you might like that, pleb 2353, but no one in the professional esports world likes that. We hate that. So what is the solution in your mind to this issue of hero pools versus map pools? What's kind of the ideal cadence? How would you create, like, you know, a certain map pool for a month with hero pools for the month and just kind of lock that down? Would you keep one of them open, or would you say lock the maps but change the hero pools every week, or lock the hero pools for the month but maybe change the maps around? Now that we've been through basically every iteration of this, which is actually insane to say in an esport that we've had so many different format iterations in 3 years, where are you guys coming down on this one?
I actually have like a really wide array of thoughts on this, because so for one thing, I guess, to be fair to the league about, is that they've actually like asked about feedback a lot, and you know,
Sure.
whether they enact it or like don't, they've at least been like way more open this year than they were in prior years. I think it's really hard to determine what an ideal format would be, because there have been so many variables this season. And like going back to the beginning of this season, let's say, for example, we had travel every week. We had a new hero pool every week.
Yeah, travel we haven't even got into yet. We'll get into it.
We have arbitrarily determined maps every week. So let's say on a let's say any given week, we only really are preparing 5 to 7 maps. Even if we play like 10 maps in scrims or 14 maps in scrims, whatever it is, we're only really hard prepping 5 to 7 maps every week because of how the like the arbitrary maps work, right? So what that means is, even though it's like obviously hard to adapt to a new hero pool, it's still manageable because we have this arbitrary like set of maps. Now, whether that's a good thing or not is up for debate, because obviously, let's say we just have like really wide open maps where poke comps are really strong, even in like basically this leads to like random advantages, like arbitrary advantages for specific teams, which isn't necessarily.
I mean, you have that, to be fair, you have that in every esport. Like, you know, literally, if you're a team that excels at you have a player in League of Legends who excels at playing top lane tank champs in a tank meta, that team's going to do better. Like, that's
Sure, exactly.
unavoidable. So anyway, continue.
So there is some level of like arbitrary advantage given to a team, but we're only prepping for 5 to 7 maps every week, so that's not a big deal. When it came to the tournament, you're literally preparing for, you know, you have your own map picks where you'll prepare harder, but then you have the whole field of maps, which means you have to prepare a lot more, I think. So in that regard, it was a lot harder, and I think that's why you saw a lot of teams actually one-tricking comps, because they couldn't be as in depth on every map as they'd like to be. I think that like from my perspective, to make everybody happy, I think that like a 2 to 3 week like hero pool would make the most sense, within like a little bit more of like a limited map pool, like not 14 but like 10, let's say. I think that makes the most sense. Just because like Overwatch League and you know, it seems like Overwatch viewers don't want like a concrete meta to develop, and I feel like that 2 to 3 week period allows for team to have like creativity but also feel comfortable in what they're picking, instead of like sometimes at the end of the week you might have grinded a comp and suddenly like a team finds like the hard counter to that comp that nobody even expected at the last day. I feel like if you give teams like a bit more time to prepare, they don't sometimes go into like I mean, I'll name a specific example. There's a week where everybody was playing like Doom Reaper, Reaper Tracer, Sombra Tracer, and nothing else, and then all of a sudden people started playing like Torbjorn Reaper, and that became like the meta on like the Friday of that week, and then there were matches on Saturday and Sunday. I feel like that doesn't happen if you have like 2 to 3 weeks. Teams can flesh out their strategy more, but I also think that it leaves in like that level of variety where you don't have everybody running the same thing, and makes the burden on teams less. And then if you have that like repeated with like a tournament at the end to cap it off every 3 weeks, it feels kind of satisfying for both teams and like fans for narratives to develop and just kind of like everybody involved, I think.
Yeah, my opinion on it would be, I like the 1 week hero bans. I think it benefits creative teams. It benefits teams that like I mean, it really benefits like the way that we approach the hero bans this year. So that's why I like it, right? I mean, it shouldn't get twisted. But I do like that system of every week hero bans are changing, even if it's not optimal for us. Obviously, 2 weeks ago Tracer got banned. Like we weren't really able to play our projectile players the past month or so. So we had Shaxx KSP playing meta where Echo was going to be picked 100% of the time, and we had to work through it and figure out how to get through it. And we still won that game. So I think there's teams still have the ability to do that if they can critically think through it and understand what they need to do to be successful. But I would like to see, I guess optimally, if the map pool shrunk just a little bit, especially going into the tournament. And I actually would be like hard in favor of there's like a stationary Koth map that you're going to start on that week, and then from there it's like the loser picks the map. I think that's more exciting. I think it gives more of an advantage. You could force
from a limited pool,
not from a limited pool. Yeah, not from 14. Yeah, so if it was loser bump that down to 10 and then did it that way, then whoever wins the Koth has an advantage in the series, because then you're always going to get a counter pick map. But
I think loser picks is very important, by the way, just because it prevents as many 3-0s from happening and also just makes it more exciting. Also, it drives narratives around, this team has never lost on this map. Now they get a chance to pick it.
Agreed.
Or, holy shit, this team is picking this team's undefeated map. And it adds a depth to strategy that I think is really lacking. It's another thing that I suggested the league do many times.
Yeah, and I think it's really good because, at least from the coaching side of things, like even if you don't really practice a map, if you see a way to exploit a team, you can still pick that map, and you could really try to force that. And I said a little bit before, was like the progression through the Paris series was we wanted the dive matchup. We got it on Busan. That's a free map for us. We're able to pick Gibraltar again. We knew we were going to get a dive matchup on that. We won that map, and then we forced Oasis. We didn't practice Oasis once last week, and we forced Oasis because they were going to play dive, and then they didn't play their dive tanks on it, and we knew we were in a fine place because they're playing something they never practiced on that map, where we could just exploit it. So I think it adds like an extra layer of depth and strategy and a lot of like benefit. So
what do you like to see?
I don't think
Avast?
Team 4 like that. Team 4 doesn't like loser pick. It's the first thing I say on that. Team 4 doesn't like Team 4 doesn't like loser pick, right? Because like then some of their precious maps will be gone.
Yeah.
And they can't then I remember back in pre-Overwatch League days, loser pick was pretty much a standard because we were very much in an endemic esports time, so everyone played pretty standard.
That's how it was when I was casting Apex, so.
Yeah. So, and everyone always, to be fair though, that was because we were all a bunch of apes back then. It was all player driven. So like no one actually, for the most part, it wasn't that there was no strategy. It's just like, since it's player driven culture more often than not is like super ooga booga in terms of their thought process. And like loser pick just resulted in like everyone wanted to play Koth like 4 maps in a row, like the same Koth map.
So that wasn't possible. That wasn't possible in Apex because the map type would change.
No,
which is fine. Like, and I think that's where you got to be is like, okay, we're playing escort next, so loser's gonna pick an escort map, and I do agree that like, first off, I hate Koth. That's not
a smart opinion.
That's not
worst game mode type in my opinion. I'll say it.
I like strategy, so Koth for me is like get the fuck out of here. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I do think that having a set order of map types is interesting. Where loser picks, that way at least you have variation. And also, just as a side note, it really doesn't result in seeing only one map, because even though probably you would see more King's Row, like just you would, because it's a good map. Every time that there's a bad map that people don't like, some team is going to specialize in that to fuck people up.
100%.
So some coach is always going to be like, well, we're the Junkertown Lords, you know, and that's just how it's going to go, and they're going to pick it. So I really don't think that's a concern from Team 4, because that will strategically sort itself out naturally.
I mean, that's not my argument. My argument is that I agree with you. I'm just saying that's Team 4's argument for the most part, is that they don't like the possibility of certain map, because then we don't get to see the lore. We don't get to see the beautiful drawn out things that we have put on the map. We don't get to see all this backstory. But
to be fair, Overwatch League fans do care more about lore than competition. So I do understand why that might not be important to them. Maybe, maybe doing it this way is wrong. Maybe we should just role play everything within the game.
You have to cosplay the hero you're playing.
Of course.
That would actually probably be insanely.
That
would probably be insanely popular. I'm not gonna lie. It would be horrible, but also popular. Anyway,
but
like K-pop.
I think the loser picks are a good format change from a set rotation of map types. Like that's by far the best. I agree with. The problem with 3-week hero pools specifically is that we brought into that issue you brought up earlier, Harsha, where if we have the system where it mirrors ranked and the league, then once again, Linkster doesn't get to play hit scan and rank for 3 weeks.
For 3 weeks, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he gets 3 week paid vacation though.
The 3 week paid vacation. I am a fan of paid vacations.
Yeah,
I am a fan of those. But I do think that's like the problem with the long extending hero pools is that it eases pain on teams and players. But then it also then erases you and puts you into like the free money zone of I'm not doing anything and my career is like withering and such. So I think 2 weeks is probably like the most ideal compromise, because you don't want to have so long that players feel like they're invalidated for long stretches. Because also, I think that's also when it circling it back to that Pine point. It's like when players don't get long times that they are not useful, it completely demotivates, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it completely kills their drive to play, more so than getting clapped, more so than getting rolled at times, unless like obviously it's just like a Shanghai Dragon season 1 type of situation or something like that, right? Like it is far worse to be completely useless for a month as opposed to just like 2 weeks, and then you get to rotate back in. So I think 2 weeks is the best compromise with that. And also I think as an aside, we've talked a lot about hero pools and X and X, and like, but we have to circle back to like the Torb point for you, Tarsha, where like someone said Torb is good. And we still haven't dealt with like any of the roots of these issues where of like, yes, we want Blizzard balancing to be better. Obviously, that's great. But I don't think any amount of balance at this point is going to solve the fundamental problem of that there are just not enough heroes in the game.
Yes.
Right? Like that's just never going to solve this at this point. It's like if one tank gets banned, you fundamentally lose a playstyle. If a single tank gets banned, you lose that playstyle entirely. You can no longer play poke without Orisa. You can no longer really play a nearly as effective dive or certain styles dive without Winston or Diva. Like you lose whole playstyles, whole swaths of heroes and options to play the game are gone as soon as one hero is banned because there is no overlap.
I think it's interesting in a way though, because like you're saying, it forces the teams to learn more styles. They can't just fall back on the crutch of having, a secondary champion or hero that's like slightly worse at it. And so it does encourage versatility. So I'm not totally convinced that's a bad thing.
I'm interested in it. For me, at least, is like, yes, it does increase variability, but I would say that right now it's not just about the playstyles, it's the fact that I think it's bad to artificially limit, like if you essentially get rid of one hero and now no one can play dive right, what if someone plays dive in a very different style, or what if this overlapping hero they could introduce could change how the dive works? Like a lot of dive currently is pretty focused on like let's kill our supports, right? Let's get rid of these supports. What if you had a tank that was much more about like a separation, and then you could like isolate people, right? Like this lack of hero variety, I think, is bad, because I don't want entire playstyles to be gone. I don't want any entire playstyle to ever be gone ever, right? Like you'd maybe want to make this optimal or different, but never entirely gone, because then what happened, like that removes, like imagine Shanghai Dragons last year, which was a big point of like they played this interesting style against goats, and imagine if a hero pool was enabled and like and now that style can no longer be seen, and now we're back to just goats, right? Like there is this symptom of just locking off whole styles of play when we have such limited hero variety, which I really don't think is great. And also key heroes that are banned can once again invalidate hero pools for players and make them a lot less useful.
It also is a fundamental balancing issue not to have enough heroes, because if we compare this to like you have to compare heroes to MOBAs at a certain point in time, because that's when we're talking about character variation. And at least I think part of the balance issues that they have around these heroes is that because there are so few, they must all be sort of viable. Whereas in most MOBAs, there are going to be heroes. Take League of Legends, for example. Some heroes in League of Legends have like terrible win rates. Like Ryze is a famous one historically that had like a 40% win rate on the ladder, but had like a 60% win rate in professional play. And sometimes like these things are just going to happen where unless a professional's playing something, it's going to be absolute trash. And if you have enough heroes, then that's fine because that it doesn't matter. Everybody has other things that they can be playing in the game. But when you have very few, it becomes much more of a balancing challenge because you can't say, oh, this hero is, only going to be good in diamond or higher, and we just accept that as developers. And this hero is just going to be great in bronze and silver, and that's fine. And it's going to suck at the professional level. It doesn't really matter because we already have enough variety. But when you end up with 2 mirror comps at the professional level for 9 months, that's when you've sort of like thrown it out the window.
Yeah, I hard agree with that. I think, if there's like, I don't know what everybody's opinion is on it, but I would love if there was actually like a, like pick ban phase for Overwatch somewhere down the road, because I think that like the game is very like MOBA-esque, and yes, how it's played and how you need to think about it and the teamwork aspect and all, well, a bunch of different things. But for that to happen, there needs to be so many more heroes, and
yes,
like you said, it has to be tuned at a place that you understand. Like, hey, this hero might be really fun to play in ranked, but it'll never be played in professional play, or it might be played in professional play, but if you play it in ranked, you're probably going to throw and get griefed by everybody on the team. So, I don't know. I think it's a huge issue, and hopefully with Overwatch 2, they said they're going to release a bunch of new heroes. So, hopefully that's something that it starts building towards.
As long as there's lore packing, that's what I really want to know.
Write the lore.
How is the
Hire
lore?
me as the lore writer. I'll do it in my spare time.
How is the lore?
Yeah,
that's the important
lore
part.
is great.
If you can't just like entirely ban out a specific style in your hero pick ban, then I think it makes sense for the game.
Yeah.
But I think that definitely we just need more heroes that do like somewhat similar things to the ones that exist, so that we can have like this variation of styles without completely getting rid of it in the pick ban phase.
Yeah.
And there are so many options that haven't been explored too, with like hero design choices, even if you just rip them straight from like other MOBAs for Overwatch. And so it's just so mind blowing to me that like so few overlapping roles have happened at this point. Like, how is Lucio still the only character that can give speed? How is that like in an FPS game, mind you, when you have really slow?
I mean, MOBA, speed is the most core and fundamental stat. Like, it is the best stat, period.
Yeah.
Like, it is extremely powerful.
And it remains the same for Overwatch too, because also certain heroes are also invalidated without speed too. Like Reaper becomes way less strong without a speed boost, like there's so many things that are so tangential or interconnected, like that intersectionality of heroes that has really never been touched as well, and I don't think has also ever been examined when we deal with balance either. Is like, if you buff one hero, another hero somewhere down the line becomes nerfed because this hero's because of how limited our pools are overall and how much they interact.
I mean, that happened before with the it's a little ways back, but when they did the Lucio like aura nerf, and then they did and even before then they did the nano nerf back when it used to give speed and damage reduction and stuff. And it's like, I mean, you literally we're able to speed a Reaper off high ground on first point, or on Hollywood on second point, and jump like over the second building to like nano blade into the back line. And it's like, okay, well, I mean, I guess everybody's just dead. Like, you can't do anything about it. But it's one of those like symbiotic relationships with all these heroes. That it's one thing, and that's why I think the balancing problem with Overwatch is like everybody gives the devs so much shit, but it's like if they tune one thing differently on a hero, it doesn't impact just that hero. It impacts probably 5 to 10 other heroes as well.
Yeah.
Well, and this is why we need more lore writers.
No,
we need
the lore.
Yeah. So
heroes out fast.
So hilariously, actually, my college roommate was just interviewing for a writer position for Overwatch at Blizzard. So I can actually tell you, they are hiring writers.
That's what we like to hear.
Well, didn't their lead character writer leave?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why. That's why. No
So
lore.
they have a
But-
bottleneck that once
so-
again, let's everyone on
Bottleneck of lore.
fanfiction.net and Wattpad and all of you, let's get you in there real quick, and we're gonna get like 80 heroes out. They're all backlogged because there's not enough bios.
Yep, more /fiction in Overwatch. That's definitely what we need. More Rule 34. All you people come in. That's actually what's been the most popular part of this game, period. Let's be real. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Thirst.
I do think that this is the lore issue though is problematic, and people are always asking like, Monte, why do you hate lore in competitive games? No, as a person, I actually really like the concept of video games as art, and I love playing story-based indie games and all this other stuff. The reason why I don't want lore in my competitive games is because, like you're saying, it becomes another element that takes time when you're actually releasing characters. So most of the audience will be too young to know this, but back in the day in League of Legends in like 2010, when most Overwatch fans were still in diapers, what they were doing was they were actually releasing new champions like every 2 weeks. And it was absolutely fucking insane. And like, I'm not advocating for that because everything was broken. It was a complete shit show. But there also wasn't really a professional scene that had developed by that point in time, so it was less impactful. But the point is that League of Legends in 2009 had 30 champions on release. It has like 150 now. So, and most of those champions were actually released in the first few years of the game, and they slowed down the cadence once they got to a specific point. But if you have all these other requirements, and look, I think that Overwatch's lore is the best lore of any competitive game, period. I don't even really think that that's like an argument. And I think that one of Blizzard's great strengths is in doing all these fucking amazing cinematics and all the other content that comes with it. But the price of that is that it does inarguably affect their ability to roll out content, and that also directly affects the professional scene, and it creates these issues where, you know, it's 2020, we've had Echo, which to be fair is probably one of the best heroes ever. Good job.
Great I think it's a great design. Yeah.
Flying Tracer.
Yeah, it's badass. But it also, like, here's a question: are we going to get another hero this year? You know what
Probably
I mean?
not.
I think they've already stated that they're not.
No, I'm
doing
pretty sure
anything.
they have
no
said
more
that.
They
heroes.
said it's the last
Yeah.
one until Overwatch 2,
Yeah.
right?
So maybe one hero a year is not awesome for the Overwatch League.
No,
Yeah, I mean,
it's not.
I think from a competitive standpoint, like, I mean, it makes it exciting and fun to coach the game. It makes it fun for players because, you know, if you get, you know, multiple new heroes getting dropped in the middle of a season, it's like, you know, somebody's grinding, somebody's trying to learn it, somebody's trying to improve. Like, you're trying to think of how to implement it into strategy and all this different stuff, and it's great for viewership. And you know, that's definitely something that, you know, they need to look for, right? Is, you know, how do they get, you know, more viewers in? How do they? I guess this year, especially with the COVID stuff, I mean, how do you keep players sane and enjoying the game and not burnt out? And, you know, that's a big part of it. Could be really helped by adding heroes and, you know, letting them have some fun and like relearn something about the game and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So,
Packing, you mentioned something that is tangential to like what we're talking about, but also probably like relevant to the whole discussion. So I wanted to ask, how do you feel about like issues kind of being like blamed on COVID, or COVID being blamed for like specific issues? Because so personally, I actually, and I know a lot of people feel this way, like this season feels way less stressful actually because of COVID. Outside of being like cooped up in your apartment, I think we spent the first 4 weeks of the season traveling, and we were literally in a hotel 4 days a week, like just like spending time in different beds. We had a bunch of travel issues, but that's kind of like you know, besides the point. But then also I lost my train of thought, but basically, like, that was the most stressful period of the season. Yeah, that was really, really hard. And that was only the beginning of the season. There was like a period where we would have been on the road for 8 straight weeks. Like, we would have been home practicing 2 of the 3 days that we like had in like Houston. And basically, like that vision for the season, I think like so many more players actually would have retired if like we kept like the old homestand system. But like, COVID has actually made the season feel like way more reasonable, I think. And I think that like it's weird that it's being blamed for a lot of the issues in Overwatch League specifically.
I think like here's the thing. Here's the thing about all esports right now. People are blaming shit on COVID because it's a convenient excuse to avoid the actual mistakes that were made. And in many ways, like Harsha's saying, it has made things a lot easier. And I think that especially for you guys, like you say, it sucks being cooped up. But in terms of quality of life for the players, it shows a lot about how, it may lead to long-term changes, right? If you realize that, hey, the players are happier this way, then you don't have to get rid of homestands, but maybe, and we'll get into like whether this tournament format, how often these tournaments should be held, talking about stages previously. This is going to be a long episode because Overwatch League has changed so many things that it's very difficult to like unpack all of these issues, and it takes a long time. But maybe homestands are held once a month for the tournament weekend instead of every week, and you do a more controlled environment for the rest of the time. This is not the show for talking about Overwatch League's really lackluster production, but there haven't been very many features on the players. And personally, when what I think is best is to be in a controlled studio environment where you can produce player features and you can do better storytelling and shoulder content and build out the broadcast rather than have it in person every week. That would be my preference. I just don't think esports is at a point yet where it makes sense to do that logistically, because the teams aren't, it's not big enough that we're filling stadiums every week, so we can't afford private jets for the players to make it easier for them. I am also going to do a different show, as I tweeted out, probably with professional athletes. So I know Trevor May, the baseball player. I'll try and get Gordon Hayward or CJ Anderson, who's a football player, or some other people to come on and talk about how they deal with burnout and travel and how we can apply that to esports. So that's going to be a future episode of Essential Esports whenever I can line up those guests. But I just think that they have access to things that make their lives insanely fucking easier than you guys have. And also private jets. And also they're not traveling literally all over the world. So there's another thing. But this is a broader topic that I'll get into in terms of formats. But I do agree that the COVID situation in many ways has made things easier in every esport, and has actually allowed us to sort of refocus on the core aspects of those esports and kind of ignore all of the extra dressing that was sometimes causing problems.
Yeah, I mean, personally for me, I'm bummed because as someone that turned down working in the league, I was just looking at the outside and everyone had to fucking march around and like do all their stuff. I was like, man, I'm having a blast. Like I get to see everyone at the homestands. I'm doing my own crap at the envy. Like I was having a blast, but sadly now I'm relegated to just being normal, not getting to watch everyone suffering from the sidelines. But it is, I think there are definitely aspects that has impacted, and like you said, Monte, this isn't the episode to go into like the production stuff necessarily, because that could be like a two-parter. I feel with
let's just say I feel like we're having a very nice discussion about how the Overwatch League's format and hero polls are actually, it's an interesting mixed bag of. Is this, good? We can have a productive conversation about that. The production episode would literally just be bagging on them the whole time because it's been trash. So
we'll avoid that topic to say the least. But it is definitely the seat, because also the crazy part is that we have a sister league within an Activision Blizzard ecosystem of the CDL.
And CDL's been great.
And CDL has had I think much better format. We had people from the beginning.
By the way, look at the last episode of this show if you're curious about COD people talking about CDL and how good it's actually been. So
yeah. And I think there are also separate aspects, because if we're being honest, like COD is filled with a bunch of bros that have known each other for 20 years and are all like showing up at the barbecues together and getting blasted and stuff like that, like before this, and they formed like almost an unofficial players union for the like it's a very different culture in general within COD than it is Overwatch. So I think that also leads to some of the better aspects of CDL, because all the COD guys, I feel like it's much more interconnected at all levels.
Sure.
And they're not afraid to just like put their foot down and be like, fuck you, like this is going to happen.
Yes.
And it happens, which is far harder with Overwatch.
It also was already built on what were effectively a series of homestands, period. Like, COD was the homestand model effectively, but in a more limited and I think less insane travel manner.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. Also, I think there's downsides to that too, because like I think COD guys are often robbing their organization's blind salary rise, but that's like
they're very good at negotiating. I do give them mad props for that.
But CDL's tournament style is a much better format, I think, overall. It also, since we brought up the crazy travel schedule, able to alleviate that for the teams, especially, and it ties in once again to the other point of like, there's just a lot less luxuries provided with travel for these orgs. Like when you have when a lot of Overwatch League teams are essentially a VC group of money shelling out to like 3 people doing everything, like, and now you have to travel like across the US internationally. Like what happens if bags get lost? What happens if X and X and X and X? And like there's not enough infrastructure in place for a lot of these organizations to effectively manage that, I think, at this point, and who knows if ever will. I mean, we've had the aspect of travel in some ways essentially cause a whole roster to explode and be dropped, like, but though I guess that was more related to COVID in some ways, but like it's still interlinked.
I don't know. I don't know if COVID's really to blame for that one. Let's just,
it's all interconnected. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying it's all 100%.
I'm not going to say it didn't have an effect, but like, I think the Titans had a lot of issues, and COVID was one of a constellation of stars of issues in the night sky that numbered in the billions. And COVID may have been a very bright star, but there's a whole Milky Way of shit out there. You know what I mean?
But the point is that CDL better. I think tournament style better.
For us, like, to go back to like the COVID stuff that you were talking about, you guys were talking about before. Like, I mean, COVID affected us a little bit differently than a lot of other teams, I think, and especially because we have such like a young roster. Like it impacted a lot of people, and people were really worried, and they didn't. Like they're all living in LA, and LA was a super big hotspot, and like people were afraid, and people needed breaks, and like it hurt people's mental. It killed passion for playing and grinding games. Like we became one of the reasons why we ended up going to the more laid back kind of format of how we want to practice and how we want to do things is just because of all of that extra stress. I mean, we lost 2 coaches to it. I got a call.
Lots of stress specifically. I would say.
I mean, like literally, I got a call, the one day, and they're just like, hey, listen, by the way, like we have to let 2 coaches go. Like COVID stuff, et cetera, et cetera. And like it's just like there was a lot of stress this year, like for us specifically. So I don't want to kind of downplay the fact of. Oh no, it didn't like impact the league or anything like that. Impacting the league, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure if viewership's not great, viewership's not great. It doesn't really matter why, but when we were like all my players, they wanted to travel. Like they wanted to travel more. We had the Dallas weekend. We were out there for a couple weeks. We get back to LA. We're supposed to go to China, and then they shut that down really quick. That was right in March, right when it all started to happen, right? So we after that point, everyone really started to get impacted because they wanted to travel, they wanted to be out, they don't want to be in their stuck in their apartments, and LA ended up becoming a pretty big hot spot, and shit was bad for a while. I mean, it's still pretty bad, and it's like some teams I think may have, I don't want to say benefited from it or had like not as hard of a time because they might have been struggling with the travel more, or they might have had players who handled the travel worse, or players who didn't want to travel at all. But when you have, I guess, like a bunch of young guys who want to do that, maybe their opinion would have changed when they were traveling, because travel does get exhausting. I know through my time in the Marine Corps, traveling all the time, it is exhausting. And especially if you're, put on a stage to perform, it's extremely stressful. But I think it definitely impacted us, in a bunch of negative ways, and I'm sure other teams the same way. I mean, like you said, the Vancouver thing's it's its own separate issue, but I mean, it's essentially like rosters are getting dropped. Like organizations don't want to. I mean, even in the MLB, look at how they're dealing with player salaries and negotiations for that, and like going pro rata for them, like the amount of games they play, and those guys make millions upon millions. So you got if it's affecting traditional sports that much, it is genuinely impacting esports as much, because realistically, if you have a multi-billion-dollar franchise in the MLB or NFL or whatever the case may be, why would they care about the secondary, little Overwatch League team that they own that
sure.
they paid, a couple $1 million for instead. It's so I think there are a lot of net negatives from it. And I do like the tournament format though, and I really do hope that's something I was talking about the CBL format. I mean, I think it's awesome, and I think if they like the system they're using like this season now with the 3 matches, and then you get seeded into the tournament and you play in the tournament. I mean, that people want to watch things that matter. People don't want to watch Shock play Shock play Boston and plow them for 25 minutes. Like,
I mean, I get a perverse pleasure in that sometimes, but yes,
yeah, that's because you're a sadist. So, it's one of those things, right? Like people want to watch games that matter, and by making it, like a very few amount of games, then you get seeded into a tournament, and you play games that matter. Every one of those games matters, and I think it's going to drive viewership up. And it'd be sick if you're going to travel somewhere next year and it's for the tournament, and you're like, hey, the quarterfinals, semis, and finals are at the tournament, and you're there for a couple of days, and you get to meet all the fans and do all the meet and greet stuff and everything like that. But I think they're headed in the right direction.
I think if they like keep this format, like the 3 matches, and then you have a tournament with seeding based on those 3 matches, I think that's like a really awesome format. And then I think next year, using like the tournament at the end of every 3-week period as like the homestand would be an amazing experience. So I think that makes the most sense.
Right. But we're going to get into this. We're going to bring everything together because you guys are like 2-week hero pools, but now we're talking about 3 weeks of matches.
I'm still 1 week hero pool, Monte. I'm still
all right. You're a 1 week.
You were one of the only.
You're a 1 week man. Yeah. So we'll get into like how we bring the hero pools and this together, because people do seem to enjoy, and I enjoy, the sort of 3 week of matches that seed into having the actual tournament. This is actually hilariously what we've ended up on is a very similar proposal to what I had before Overwatch League even started, but we'll also get into that. So to describe Overwatch League, for those of you who don't know, in the first 2 years, we had what we called stages, which were 4. The season was divided into 4 stretches. In season 2, it was 10 games. So each team would play 10 games, and they had a running total of their regular season, which would seed into the season playoffs. And then at the end of every 10 games, there was a stage 1 where you'd go 9-1, and then you'd be seeded into a tournament bracket for money only. Did not affect the actual outcome of seeding in the season playoffs. So it was just a fun mini tournament at the end of every 10 games. I loved that system. I thought it was really good. And now what's happening is we're talking about having the tournament now gives you wins that affect your season playoffs. So they've changed from the tournament having no effect on the overall season playoffs to now having adding wins to your total for the season playoffs. So it is a different system that is more impactful, your victories in these tournaments earlier in the season. So what is your guy? We've been through the first one now. They've announced another one for June and July. What is your experience as coaches and analysts been taking a look at this format, and what do you like and dislike about it?
I personally really like the format. Obviously, there is like the one aspect that's kind of weird is it's based off of 3 matches, right? So the seeding can be really whack in terms of like.
I would do 6 games personally.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this kind of changes with how well Florida did in the tournament, but they played Boston like twice to get their 3-0 seeding, I think. Whereas like
they also played Titans once, I believe. Too.
They played like Justice Titans, and
they also
Boston,
did make the finals. So
there's no denying. So.
But they did both have an easy road to get there, but they also did perform well in the tournament itself.
Yeah. But I think that like personally, just having it means the regular season means something because you get good seeding, you get like a bye. Potentially, you only have to play 1 match to get an extra win onto the win column in your season standings. So it means that the regular season actually means something. Whereas to be honest, like I think a lot of people felt like they were just playing matches and like going through like just a routine for no real reason. I think that's why there was like a lot of motivation issues. So I think the tournament kind of helps remedy that to some degree. And I think that like having, like stage playoffs are one of the most exciting things about like Overwatch League, in my opinion, and having like a system where you actually have like a regular cadence for tournaments is really just like a good change. So I'm personally, even with like the minor flaws in terms of like seeding, I personally think that like the change they made is a really good idea, and I like hope they keep it.
Packing, what about yourself? How are you feeling as a coach?
Yeah.
I know you like 1 week hero pools, so you're a little bit different.
Okay, so
You know?
there's a reason to that madness as well. In terms of like the tournament format, why I like the 1 week hero pools is I think that the hero pool should be throughout the tournament as well, right? So
Yes.
there's the first week is one hero pool, second week same thing, third week same thing,
Yes.
and then a new hero pool for the
Because
tournament.
again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is that you need to decide what you're testing for. When you
Yeah.
design a competitive format, the first question has to be, what am I rewarding by doing this? And you can't have a massively different meta in week 1 that you have in week 4 and retain intellectual integrity, because it just creates random results. Continue.
Yeah, and like the competitive integrity of it for me is like a huge portion, because this past tournament, right? You have 3 weeks of hero pools, 3 team, a bunch of teams like excelled in the creativity and like the adapting to the adversity and adapting to the hero pools and coming up and winning their games. And then you go, okay, hey, the tournament's coming up, and let's can all the hero pools, play whatever you want. It like changes the game at a fundamental level, and it actually puts a lot more work on people's plate, because now, even though there's 4 heroes typically banned, that's an infinite number of possibilities of compositions that you can now run. And
it
you're
also
only getting a limited amount of practice. So,
it also means that if you had a specialist who is very good in one hero pool, you are now again changing from rewarding specialization to rewarding flexibility again. So
yeah,
that's some bullshit.
Yeah, so the reason I say I really like the 1 week opposed to the 2 week for this is the competitive integrity aspect of, hey, you could have a really good hero pool for that first 2 weeks when it matters, but it doesn't doesn't matter as much, and then you could get like shafted in the next 2 weeks, and your third week, say you go 2-0 in the first week, really good hero pool for you, and then the next one, it's like, well, you're just going to lose. It's terrible hero pool for you. And then you end up at 2-1. Maybe you get a pretty high seed in the tournament, and you just lose your game and, give someone a huge advantage over you because it's an extended hero pool rather than, just keeping the format, similar throughout and going, hey, listen, we want hero pools to be a part of the game. So let's just keep hero pools. Let's keep it, constant across the board. And let's reward teams that do well at hero pools, and not try to jimmy in any kind of no hero pool stuff. So,
well, it lends itself to the question too of, so for example, because the process, some people have brought up, and though I do love like people have developed the little whiny baby voice for people like, well, what about regular season? What about regular season?
Fuck
games?
regular season. Fuck
what
you.
about him?
All right. I'm sorry.
I
need to go on a rant.
Okay,
so
go on a
let me
I'm ready.
explain why we even have the system we do in Overwatch League. And here is what concerns the owners, and is that the reason why you have a regular season with a fixed number of games is that as competitors and as fans, objectively, tournaments are more exciting to watch. So you might say, well, why don't we have those in traditional sports? Well, turns out if you have a dog shit team, that you're going to get eliminated first every time. Okay? So that means that if you're going to sell fewer tickets, you're going to be able to monetize your sponsors way worse because you're not going to have as much exposure. So the thing that we need to balance for here when we're considering the investment of the owners and their continual ability to run teams is that the problem you have when you come to tournaments versus leagues is, how do I balance having enough exposure for this team, so enough guaranteed games that I can continue to it makes financial sense for me to operate this team, versus how many times do fans have to watch really bad teams play? So this is the balancing act that has always been there, and that is why the stage solution for Overwatch League was an elegant solution, because all teams were guaranteed the vast majority of games that they would be playing. They were guaranteed 40 games a season in Season 2. And then maybe they get a few extras there in stage playoffs or in season playoffs, right? But there has to be sort of a baseline of guaranteed games that are set. So I can't have what I want, which is what I used to cast in Korea, which is tournaments, which is how Korean esports worked for 20 years before franchising stepped in and before the developers stepped in. I realize I can't have that anymore. And I'm willing to make that trade-off for better ownership, more stability for players, all of these good things that come along with it. But when we're talking about why this has to happen and why it happens in regular sports is because they want to sell out a baseball stadium 80 times in a season per stadium. That's why it happens. And because they want to sell a certain amount of viewership to people for media rights deals. It is a business decision. It is not a competitive decision. Period.
But here's what people love to have been saying, and obviously I'm in agreement with you, Monte, by the way. It's just, well, I love hearing all the people like, well, tournaments are gonna get boring too, and I'm like,
fuck you, they don't. They don't.
Yeah.
By the
I
way,
don't see how tournaments are gonna get boring.
I love this because okay, so in one of the funny things about like our NFL and our NBA is that they refer to people who make these like sort of ludicrous claims without knowing history or without having an appreciation for the sport, nephews. And Overwatch League is just completely overrun with nephews. Guys, we know the tournaments are more exciting because we have 20 years of Korean esports on television that shows us. We have 40 seasons of the OSL. 40. Okay? We know that tournaments are more exciting. We know that people don't get bored of tournaments, period. That is a ludicrous thing to say.
Well, it's just a dumb argument in general because, like, okay, let's say it just so happens that we do more tournaments and they eventually get more boring. They're still going to be more impactful than, like, a cajillion regular season games while being equal boringness, right? Like, worst case scenario, you've traded out equal boring, you've just transmuted the boringness, but now you have a more impactful format, right?
Yeah.
It's literally just like there is no downside. There is zero downside to being run unless you are somehow you have received a lobotomy at some point in your life and you were like, I love regular season games, dude. I love them so much. Like, hit me again with the spike right through the cortex.
Here's the thing. Like, I like hockey, okay? And I used to watch a bunch of hockey games because I grew up in Colorado and as an Avalanche fan. When they were good, it was actually pleasurable to watch regular season games, especially rivalries like with the Red Wings back in the day. But you know what I do now? I literally will subscribe to YouTube TV for the NHL playoffs, and I'll watch the shit out of that and the NBA playoffs. And I literally don't watch regular season because you know what? There's no point. There is no point to watching the NBA or the NHL regular season because the playoff format is so awesome in those games that you can just watch that. There's tons of games. It's best of 7 series in both conferences in like a quarterfinal format. There's a bazillion games, and I can see all the peak NHL that I need to see in that period. And that's it. That's it. So
yeah. And to build to that too, like the NBA actually last year started doing something to get more viewership, which was they were offering on like the NBA TV app or whatever that you could just watch the fourth quarter because nobody wanted to watch the first 3 quarters because it was a waste of time. Like I'm a huge 76ers fan. I go to a couple of games every year. Like I love it. Same thing with the Mets. I'm a huge Mets fan. But do I watch 81 games? No, I don't. I don't watch 162 games. It's crazy to think that you're gonna get the viewership from that. But when it's at the end of the year, like the MLB, NBA playoffs come, like it's huge and people love it and everybody watches it because the games matter. And the NBA, I was watching today, or I saw something that like they're proposing for this year to do a 16-team tournament instead of the remainder of the regular season. Conferences don't matter. It's just seeded 1 through 16 total best teams, and they're just gonna play it out.
I watched the shit out of that.
Holy shit! Like that is going to be amazing. Like I mean, it's going to be absolutely outstanding, and that's what I mean. It's probably gonna have better viewership than anything else. I mean, March Madness with the NCAA basketball, like one of the most viewed things of the entire year because guess what? It's a tournament format. I mean, even though it's one game that decides everything, like it matters, and like there's upset potential and people buy into that, and then there's the narratives and the storylines, and I mean it's great, it's exciting, it's for the fans, which is if you don't have the fans, you don't have the league, and then nobody gets paid, and we all don't have jobs. So,
I know the most tragic thing about sports is the fans. I agree.
Yeah.
But what about my 100 regular season games though? I want a TV deal where I can pay to only watch regular season games. That's what I want.
Lore for the 100,
I need lore. I need lore for the regular season. Actually, that's what I really need. I need to know what's going on between these games. How is it going to lead on to them not doing anything later, and how it impacts nothing? That's what I need to know about.
But I do think that there are legitimate business concerns to how you structure this, which is why I would not advocate for, well, let's just do only tournaments, right? There is a big limiting factor there, and I lived through that in Korea. Like, I lived through the fact that they basically had to create two structures in order to solve this problem in Korea in StarCraft, which is that they had the tournaments like OSL and MSL where they were 1v1. It was every player playing for themselves. Players would be on teams like SK Telecom or KT or anything like that, and they would hit each other and eliminate each other. But they also had to create a different structure, which is called Pro League, which was a team-based league. So these things would be running concurrently. So you'd have the tournaments where the players would all eliminate each other, and then you had the guaranteed foundation of viewership because the teams were always present. Once they were in Pro League, they were just locked in there. So you had them playing, you'd play like a best of 7, but you'd switch players between games. So it was about depth of your roster, and then also that the team was guaranteed like a certain level of exposure. So they solved this by running 2 different formats simultaneously, which is very interesting in and of itself. But we're not going to do that, obviously, with Overwatch League. So we need to figure out a way that you can have these guarantees. And I think that the best system is the kind of hybrid system that is operating currently by guaranteeing a certain number of matches and even guaranteeing a slot into those playoffs. Now, how this happens when you have, COVID has made the situation where we have unequal number of teams in these different tournaments, which is not ideal. But there is a world where you actually just set sort of the parameters between these different structures, and you carve up the league into different sort of sectors. Now, how would you make this interesting is another story, because we don't want none of the teams to play against each other, which will bring me to my point of my original proposal for Overwatch League format. So you like this. The way I couched it was that it was sort of, it was more along the lines of, I guess, like tennis, where you have like, the US Open and the Australia. You have the big tentpole tennis events where everybody kind of travels there and competes. You could also compare it to like a Mario Kart race, okay, where you have like the Star Cup or whatever. So my idea was that when we go into the home and away model, is that we carve everything up into like a North American Cup, and then you have the Asian Cup, and you have the European Cup, or West Coast NA, East Coast NA and Europe/Asia. And what you do is you theme this cup. So we would call it like, you would have 4 cups a year, like the Omnic Cup and the Talon Cup, okay, whatever you want to call it. Theme it around Overwatch lore. Fine, cool.
More lore. I like it.
Perfect.
Well, look, man,
we need.
You got to design the product for the audience. I may not like it personally, but I know what the Overwatch fans like.
The regular season cup, then we can have the regular season cup.
So the idea here is that you have the Omnic Cup, and the Omnic Cup is being played simultaneously. So you have the West Coast Omnic Cup, East Coast Omnic Cup, and you have the Asian Omnic Cup. Okay, and the teams that are in there all compete for that first stage. And like the first stage is always called the Omnic Cup. So you can actually say like, oh, this team is like a 3-time Omnic Cup winner, right? Whatever you want to say. You can drive narratives that way is my point. It's primarily a narrative driving device for the broadcast. Now you have a winner from each of these regions, and then maybe you have an international tournament that happens with the top teams from each of the cups after you resolve that. But the key thing is with travel. So you might say half the West Coast teams are going to go to Asia, and half the Asian teams are going to go to the West Coast. So some teams are at home for the entire month, and the other teams are traveling among the different homestands or whatever, right? Or you just have a central studio in LA and one in New York and one in Seoul, and you just play there. So you actually do mix up the teams that are competing within this while still maintaining that sort of, isolated environment, if that makes sense. And the reason why this was not accepted was because it was too complicated. And the idea was if you won a cup, you'd get circuit points playoff points, let's say, that would lead to playoff seeding. And the playoff points would increase in amount as you got closer to playoffs. So it would weight the back end of the season because patches exist, and like you don't want a team that was good on a patch in 6 months before playoffs start. It's what League does. It's very effective. Yeah. It's what League does. It's very effective. League doesn't do that anymore, but it's what they did at the time. So the idea here is that you have multiple champions all at one time. So half the teams will travel to a different region. You play your little tournament there. Each of them raises a trophy, and then maybe you have a weekend where it's like, the ultimate Omnic Cup winner, and then you just move all the teams again and you do this. It limits travel. Are you guys following? I know it's complicated.
Yeah. No, I get your system that you're going for so far.
It limits travel. It allows us to have kind of multiple tournaments that are going on simultaneously. And it also eliminates a lot of jet lag problems because you're simply traveling within a region, or you're within one place in a region. And then you can go back and have the teams all like sleep in their beds in LA, regardless of whether they're in Houston or not. And maybe you do this. I wouldn't do this necessarily the same way I said it, because obviously things have changed a lot. But in a world where you could have 3 different studios in 3 different regions, like I said, LA, New York, and Seoul, just as an example, or, Shanghai or whatever, then all the teams live in that place, and then they play the 3 weeks of their regular season game. And then for the finals, maybe we do a homestand in Houston and a homestand in Boston and a homestand in Shanghai for the local cup finals. And at the conclusion of that, you can either just go into a different cup and we can just make content about like, well, this Omnic Cup Asia winner was way better than that Omnic Cup West Coast winner. Like this, fuck those guys. Like this one was way harder. Or you just have another weekend after that where you fly everybody to one additional homestand, play that out, and then you go into the next thing. But it also allows, let's say you have 4 of these a year. The West Coast teams would travel for 2 of them. So let's say we put all the West Coast teams in Los Angeles. Well, they have 4 weeks at home, then they go to one weekend event, and then they go to Seoul and they stay there for 4 weeks. Then they come home, stay in their beds in LA. I think this just ends a lot of the issues that you might have with these structures. Also, purely from a cost perspective, you could basically just rent a bunch of apartments for visiting teams in each of these centralized cities, clean them, before the next cup comes in. The teams just realize they're going to have their own bedroom, and like you can standardize sort of the facilities to make it a lot easier. Like hey players, here's a PC, bring your keyboard and mouse, plug it in. You're going to have an opportunity to stream. You can cook for yourself. You'll be living with one of your teammates, but you'll all have your own room, and it keeps costs down because you just have a bunch of furnished apartments in these individual cities. So I think like this is, for me, I think this is a good solution.
Harsha, I'm gonna let you. Do you want to go first, or I'll go? I can go first if you want to go. If you don't want to go first, or Packy.
You can go ahead. I want to think more.
All right. Well, first thing I'm gonna say is it sounds like to me it was said it was too complicated because the league had to do it as opposed to the teams, because it's not too complicated.
No.
If the teams have to find 5 venues throughout the year, but if the league does have to find 6 venues internationally, well, that's just too much, right?
I think you could do this though in a controlled environment. And the reason why it was too complicated was the presumption was that playoff points and all these individual micro tournaments, I was told, would be too complicated for fans. Again, even though we literally have 20 years of esports history that shows that people can understand this.
Also, so it's really not that
and they're
hard
like,
to get, right?
People, I mean, I agree with you. This is, we are people who understand these things. But I was told that no, it's the regular season that's much easier to understand, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, which it is, but I also think that it doesn't matter. You can still do this.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird to me too, because like for me personally, like it's the interesting part is that we have a league. And I brought this up myself when I said I want some of these format changes, that we have the flexibility of having a whole year blocked out for a league, right? Like it's with sort of the endemic style of esports, there really isn't the same level of flexibility, right? Because you sort of have a window for a tournament, Mm-hmm. Like sometimes that can change, like you can move it, like obviously, but there's generally windows of that when a venue is booked. But as a league, you have a year essentially to plan your events. And sure, you might have to squinch a little bit, squish them together. You might have to extend them, but you have all this extra comfort time and cushion time to sort of determine how your system's going to run. So like, I don't even know how that would ever be more complicated in understanding, because you can set it up really easily and block out content. But that's besides the point. The point here is that like, I also think you don't even have to have something with like stationary hubs, right? You could just have like,
it just makes it easier. That's why I'm saying
it does make it easier. Yeah, it does make it easier. But the whole point of like the tournament style in general, it's like when people ask like, because also a concern that's brought up is like, how do you seed these tournaments without like, because some people are like, well, what if we play these 3 games that for the May tournament that was just played, they were played online, and then they seed into the other tournament. How do you have those seedings without like some sort of regular season or online play? And the answer is like, you can just have smaller tournaments, or this cup thing that you're bringing up, or the cup system, right? Like you can have seeding determined by other tournaments. It's a wild concept, right? But like, it's not like tournaments are just like this one-time thing that you just throw in there and then poof, that's it. It's the once in a lifetime event. The blue moon has occurred and it's gone. And it's gone. Like no, you could even have like, if people are worried because you have to balance sponsor obligations, is you could have tournaments that like people play for the seeding, and the worst teams for those tournaments go into essentially an elim tournament, and they play in that tournament, and that's like almost like the toilet bowl tournament in a way, where then whoever makes it out gets to come forward and go compete again. It's almost like a double elim tournament, but only for the bad teams, so everyone can get their second chance. Like there's so much flexibility.
I agree.
That's so much.
That's the
There's
thing
no
about
complaints to be had.
That's the thing about esports that really tilts me when these traditional sports people get involved, is they're like, we're gonna do this because it's what sports does. I'm like, you're not even thinking about why sports does that, or if it's good. We can literally do whatever the fuck we want. Like, isn't this amazing that we have a blank slate, that we could actually maybe learn something from someone at some point in time?
Oh no, Monte, you have to do exactly what everybody else does. That's the way the world works. Not be your own person.
I was really disappointed when we just immediately started doing online matches, like as like the first solution when basically we had to cancel all the homestands in Overwatch League, and like we were just gonna play out the season like it was just a normal season, because like in my mind, I think this is the year where you like experiment with a bunch of different forms. Obviously, like things are just very different now. Like the Asian teams don't even play the teams in North America anymore. Like competitive integrity is like at an all-time low, and it just has to be that way because you can't travel.
Yeah.
You don't want to play on like 150 ping or whatever it is. So like I figured this season was the season to try out a bunch of things, and I'm glad that they're trying like the tournament format for May, June, and July. I was really hoping that they'd like immediately try something like that the second that we went online, because in my mind, there's no reason to just keep doing things the way they're going and like pretend everything is normal when everybody understands that it's not. I don't mind the cup idea, and I know a lot of teams are going to try doing something similar to what Monte suggested in terms of like having a home base. So some teams were just going to travel every week and come out of their home. Like, for example, we only really played in North America and sometimes like Paris. I don't think we had any Asian trips, so we would have just come from Houston every week and like traveled every week. But I know, for example, teams that were going to go on like an Asian tour, so like let's say Shock or Vancouver, they were considering, or even Valiant, like Packing might have thought about this. They were considering just having like a home base in China and having to travel like, you just travel to a different city in China whenever you played. Yep. And then you played in Korea, you fly out to China, or fly out from China to Korea. But you'd have like the same environment, and it'd feel kind of like another home.
Some teams are just going to swap their facilities. Like Dallas was going to host the Guangzhou guys in Dallas. Yeah. Oh, and then Guangzhou was going to host Dallas.
Yeah,
like,
we were talking about
that. But it doesn't have to be that complicated. That's the thing. And people will be like, well, Monte, isn't that like why, Homestands, isn't that what the owners were sold on? Because we also have to think about the business model of this league, because it is inextricably tied to the format. It is. Sure. Because when you sell a franchise for $20 million in Overwatch instead of $12 million in League of Legends, what you are saying is that the reason why this is more expensive is because we are unlocking an additional revenue stream, which is homestands. So we're doing, like, that is the reason for the increase in price. But I can't get into all of the business aspects of this publicly. I can only tell you guys the following. The business model has to change, because homestands are great, and even if they sell out, they are not at a scale where it is going to make the teams money currently. They are not.
Sure.
Like, it doesn't matter. You guys will see a sold out homestand and be like, that's cool. And I also think it's cool. In fact, I love that about Overwatch. One of the things that I loved and was sold on about Overwatch League was localization and was homestands. I think it's great. And the homestands that I attended last year were wonderful. People showed up.
Awesome.
The Dallas one was fucking sick. But what people also don't know is that a lot of people flew in from all over the U.S. to go to that Dallas homestand because it was unique. Yeah. On a long timeline, you're simply not going to be able to fill those venues because esports just isn't there yet. And that's not a problem. But I think one of the good things that's happening right now is that I don't think OWL is, it's going to continue, guys. And I don't think it's unsavable. And I do.
Some people aren't going to like that statement, Monte. Some people aren't going to like that one.
Monty's about to get freaking put up on a cross after that one.
No.
It'll be all over Reddit, all over Twitter.
Look, I think you can save OWL. Like, I think it is redeemable, right? I think you got to go, Jesus and like resurrect yourself after 3 days. Like, we're rolling the stone shut on the tomb, but luckily, like, there are things that can be done and are being done right now. I think the tournament system is an example of that. I think that the iterations of hero pools are an example of that. And people will often mistake my criticism for saying that I want it to die. I really don't, guys. I really actually like it. And I didn't spend years of my life trying to make this thing cool. It like pains me that I spent years. Like, you guys, like, fuck you. I had to spend years of my life trying to make sure this thing is okay. And it distresses me that I see things going, in certain ways. So this is all to say that I love homestands. I think they can be integrated, but I think you have to do it on a more limited basis because of this, just where esports is as an industry right now. There isn't a game in the world, except for maybe League of Legends in China, that's going to sell out weekly events. And they have localized partially in the LPL. And China is the biggest esports market in the world. Okay. And even then they're like, can we really do this right now? So I think you have to make these things a little bit more special. And the way that you can solve this for the teams and their own sanity is to create a series of hubs with small studios with, here it is. People aren't going to like this one, without an audience, because in LA, as everyone here will tell you, by the time we got to the end of season 2, there were like 30 people in the audience. Yeah. When there are like 500 seats. Okay.
I mean, it's the same way with League of Legends too, right? Like
yes, of course it is.
At the Riot Studios, you go. Everybody, like, I was there for the first time this past year, and I was like, "Hey, you want to go see this League of Legends match? Go to Riot Studios." I'm like, "Oh man, never been there before." Walk in, and it's like 5 people, and it's all just like owners of teams just sitting there watching their team play. It's like, oh, cool. Like this is cool, but I think it's one of the things I think League of Legends does so well is because they brought with their broadcast and their production and how they like shape like the atmosphere of like you watching the game online. It's like really like at home, and they make you like feel like you're like a part like sitting on the couch next to them watching the game.
Yes.
And I think like that's super important.
Yes. And League still does fill stadiums in the States. They do it for playoffs. Sure. They do it for big events. And I don't think, given the fervor of the smaller Overwatch fan base, but they were still able to fill 3,000, 5,000. Like, all the homestands last year were great. Even though the LA one was smaller, it really had like a nice fucking vibe and like good energy.
The LA one was awesome. Yeah, I was at all 3 last year actually, because I lived in Georgia at the time. We played in Dallas. The Dallas one was, it was absolutely bonkers. It was a crazy, amazing experience. The Atlanta one was, it was in like a theater opera house type deal. It was
great.
Still awesome. It was still absolutely awesome. And ours was right in the center of Center City, LA. And it was a little bit of a smaller venue, but it was packed and fans were everywhere. And like afterwards, it was great.
Yep.
It was a great, unique experience.
And I think that can continue to happen, but you just have to be more thoughtful about it. And what the problem that we're having, I think, ultimately is like, this is going to require a fundamental reshaping of the business model of Overwatch League. And that's just going to have to be a bullet that Blizzard bites on that one. But I think we see that the shift at some level is going to be necessary. And I think a lot of the decisions that have been made have been trying to smash the business model square peg through the round hole of reality. And I admire the vision that went into it. And indeed, that's one of the things that I signed up for and was inspired by, was that Blizzard was going big. And I'm like, I was like, I would be a fool to miss out on this, because if it's successful, it is going to fundamentally change esports. And in many ways it has, and it has done a lot of very good things. But I think that now that we have a better idea of sort of the stable audience and the stable structure of Overwatch, I think we need to readjust expectations. And there are many ways that this Overwatch League can be successful. And I think it's just about scaling the expectations and changing them. And I think, when we have controlled environments with studios without an audience, it allows you different ways of production, because when you're not dealing with fans, you can become much more nimble within the studio in terms of the kind of content that you can create. It refocuses you in a lot of ways. It's the reason why for Flashpoint we decided not to have a studio, or not to have an audience in the studio, is because it simply allows you to be better at making content for the stream. Yeah. And you lose some of the fun of that atmosphere, but you can always get it back. You can always once a month have a homestand, or have 3 homestands that are happening simultaneously. That's just hype, man. Like, I think it really does like split the difference, and also keeps the fans engaged, keeps the audiences big, and drastically reduces the insane costs of production and venue that homestands have.
That's the thing.
Wait one second. I just feel bad for Harsha packing, because Harsha's been trying to make the same point for like 30 minutes.
Sorry.
Well, I just like really quickly want to like lay this out, because I think people read too much into like the PR statements, or like even like what sold out means and stuff like that. I went to multiple different DC homestands this year. They got like thinner and thinner as time went on. Like this homestand model was not going to be sustainable for teams that just had like 5 homestands. Like, they were going to get tiring, I think. And I think that like you can't just buy into every homestand was just going to be sold out for all of this year. Like, it needed to change. I think it's not, esports isn't at a place where you're going to sell out every single like game that, or every single homestand that you host. And
I wish it was like that, by the way, but it's just not. And I can't I can't change that by wishing things. So
I think that the model just needs to fundamentally change, and like having homestands be the playoffs makes the most sense to me, in terms of like, that's always going to be a really hype environment. You're going to see the best games, and like I think you don't have to travel as frequently for that, if it were the case. So, having like a traveling cup where you have like a stable home base, that seems really cool, and then you can have a homestand to cap it off. But definitely not making homestands the norm. I think that was really hard for teams this year.
Yeah, and that was actually funny you said that, because that's what I was actually going to ask you, because like their DC was supposed to have like 1 billion homestands this year, and you guys played in like 3 in a row, like at the beginning of the year, and
Well, once again, Harsha's not on DC packing.
Yeah, he played.
Just want to put that out there.
He dodged that bullet. He's just like, he tried to catch it, but fortunately somebody dove in front of him at the last second to save President Harsha.
President, yeah.
Thank you, Kate.
Yeah, but that's the thing I was curious about, because there were a bunch of teams that played there multiple times, and it seemed like to me, from like watching it online, it looked like there were less and less people every time when it was going through. And I don't think that's like a byproduct of anything like extremely negative, but just the fewer events you have, the more important it makes them. I mean, you look at like the Counter-Strike, how they've done things for 15 years now, 20 years. It's I went to DreamHack, I think it was DreamHack Atlanta 2016 or 2017, something like that. And like the up until like the tournament bracket, like all their group stage and everything was online in Atlanta. Like they did it from the same place, they just did it online, and then they opened the doors when it was time for like the actual playoff, like the playoff bracket and championship bracket to start. And it was packed, and it was insane, and everybody loved it.
E-League is a great example of this.
Yeah, E-League, yeah.
Not everything has to be broadcasted, and it's also a problem that it's just I feel like it's a problem that, and Monte, you 100% know this, obviously, is like it reaches into everything Overwatch esports from like a broadcast perspective of like, because it even goes to contenders where it's like it all must be broadcast, and like everything must be shown, and like I want to watch Tea Party and Wave Check, 2 absolute no-name teams, battle out for like the 8th time on my 300 viewer YouTube stream, and it's like, no, like absolutely not. I don't want to see this. Like, get this off my screen. Like, I like 100%. Like, let's get to some stakes. And like, I think now for contenders at least, it's been changed a bit. They've changed this format. But then also, you know, for Overwatch League, now they're making some adjustments. Hopefully, we continue to see that, like, you know, this probably is, and also I think some teams probably had less of a financial burden than others because, like, for example, DC had an event connection, so like, yes, they invested heavily in their events, but they also were more efficient at doing so due to their previous background, as opposed to like other teams where it's sort of like you have one guy that randomly show up that was like left over from the org restructuring like 8 times, i.e. Houston, where there's like one cool Matt is the interim GM, you know, it's like, you know, like there's a lot of like just one dude that's sort of left over, and now they have to be in charge of like somehow finding a venue when they don't have any other, you know, it gets crazy and wacky fast with that much venue space and venue time being needed.
Yeah, and it also, the fundamental thing that people need to understand about the homestands is that there is sort of a fixed production cost that goes with them. So if I have one person in the audience, the production cost is pretty much the same as if I have 15,000 people in the audience. So the real barrier, because the cost of the venue isn't the biggest cost, it's the fact that I have to put up these screens and I have to make it look cool and I have to pay for all of the production that goes into it, which is not going to change because the experience has to be similar across every single homestand to keep a level of quality up, right? So the issue is, can I get a large enough venue and fill it to justify the production cost? And at that point in time, the answer is usually no. And so I think it's more efficient if teams pool their resources. If you carve the league up into various ownership groups that are divisions, and you say, you guys, West Coast team, are responsible for figuring out your own studio, whether that's in Vegas, which would be much cheaper, probably, or LA, or something like that. And you guys figure it out. And if you share the cost of that production at that point in time, it's going to be way more manageable. So, I mean, I didn't really intend to get into the business aspect of this, but I guess it's kind of inevitable because what is happening is that the business end is affecting the format decisions. And hopefully, I hope that they, you know, we talked about COVID being blamed for a bunch of problems that are not really related to COVID across the industry right now. I hope they just fucking blame this on COVID, or like, well, we're changing it because of, you know, COVID. That'd be great. Like, please make changes and blame it on that. Please. Like, if you can make it better, then blame like scapegoat the shit out of COVID. That would be great. I'm all about it.
Also, I think we diverted a bit because Packing started out with like how he wanted the hero pool system to work.
Yes, we do have to. We do have to bring it together. We do have to bring it together because
we have to bring it back to, because I want to know what Harsha's opinion on hero
So
pools
let's talk about this now. Hero pools, when we discuss these tournaments and what the ideal length is, for me, having the sort of like 3 weeks, 6 games that seed into a tournament is cool, and I like that. And if we could have the same map pool for all of that with loser picks maps, you limit the number of maps that you can have, maybe 2 or 3 per type, and you do loser picks, and there's a set order of map types, whether it's like it goes like Koth, Escort, Assault, whatever. Anyway, and then what does it mean to have a hero pool that's the same for that entire period? And is that the ideal? Because like we were talking about, it does get into, well, you're actually just testing for who's the best during this hero pool / map pool, and you have a better idea of that, but you don't necessarily have the same variance. And to Harsha's point earlier, players could get theoretically locked out of that entire month, not only of competitive play, like professional play, but also literally on the ladder, like unable to play what they're good at.
Well, Harsha?
Well, I mean, so my original idea, I guess, was like the 2 to 3 week format, and then you have that hero pool capped off with a tournament of the same hero pool, so you kind of like figure out who the best team is at each hero pool. I think that one thing I didn't consider is the same point that I also made, oddly enough. Like, if you just have like hit scan banned, then all of a sudden your hit scan player can't play the game for 3 weeks. So, I think that the way they've implemented it is kind of interesting in the sense that like you're testing different skills at different points of the season. So in the regular season, you're testing like flexibility week to week, and then in the like the capstone events, like the tournaments at the end of every month, you're testing like who's the best when everything is in the pool. You know, like I don't know if I'd prefer having a fourth hero pool or if I'd prefer just the way it's currently implemented, because even though both test like different strengths, I think that like at the end of the day, like the tournament format is what makes it interesting, not really like the whether it's like on a hero pool or whether it's on like an open hero pool. I think both would be interesting, but I do think that the way they implemented it this time and the way it played out, it was kind of cool to see that every team just played to their own specific styles when everything was in the like in the mix. So I personally don't mind having no hero pool for the tournaments, just because I liked that we saw like such diverse styles. It made it way harder on the teams, for sure, but I do think it's like it is kind of their way of like testing like multiple different strengths of teams in the season. It is kind of bullshit though that you reward wins for that. So like teams get qualification to the end of the season playoffs based on a different set of skills than they do on like the regular season. But like either way, I think that the current implementation is okay. And I'm not sure what the best way, like the best format would be, but I do think that like at least limit the map pools and then make it losers pick, and I think you'd have a much more interesting regular season.
My concern with the long-term implications of having the difference between hero pools and then no hero pools for the playoffs is like it did what you were saying this time, and I think Huck made a very good point on Twitter saying like, well, the limitations of hero pools forced us to learn all of these things so that when no hero pools, it did play to the strengths. But my long-term concern is when you do that for every playoffs, that you're basically just going to end up with goats or a GOAT's equivalent every single playoff, because eventually, without enough balance, like I feel like that meta is going to be solved. It's just that everybody was scrambling to deal with hero pools, but if you have enough no hero pool tournaments, then you just end up with GOATs again. That would be my theoretical concern.
I do think that next time playoffs come around, teams are probably going to play similar stuff that they played during the May playoffs. So I think that's kind of fair, like a fair point. Maybe like in no hero pools, a GOATs kind of comp does develop, and then everybody just starts playing that. But I do think at least, I don't know. I think we'd have to like wait and see a little bit. I think that what you're saying is fair, but they also have committed to like faster balancing. And to be fair to them, they haven't been balancing like once every 5 weeks. They've been balancing like every couple of weeks. It's still kind of like smaller changes, so it's not really affecting the meta that much. But I think that, I mean, maybe the balance team does need to be a little bit more aggressive, but I think that the current implementation has been fun, and I guess we need to wait and see if it'll be like that long term, or if teams are just going to find something that they just hard grind instead.
Yeah, and even if the balance changes are small, like at least there's changes, right? Like I'm happy. I'm just happy that they said they were going to do it, and they're sticking to their guns, and they're I'm sure over time they'll find a system that works like really well, and nerfs things and buffs things to a place where they're going to be like really viable or unviable. But I mean, it's just good to actually see it being done and actually be able to go, oh cool, like everybody's bitching about May, and May, granted, still got played this week a little bit, but got fucking pounded. Like, I mean, it was big changes, and then the CC changes. Like, they did make some, huge strides to making the game be really fun to play. So, I think that's a huge step in the right direction. So,
yeah, they're making efforts. I do think though that like when we talk, Harsha, you brought up like we're gonna see certain play styles already been refined continue to get played. I think that's only natural though for Overwatch at this point, because I'm of the opinion of generally when it comes to Overwatch in its current state, we'll see as we go forward, that I think there's too much, we overanalyze a lot of the times, like especially, and analysts in particular that aren't currently with teams like under a coaching structure have been players, we often misattribute complexity, like there's too much complexity, but the reality is like there's only so many play styles we can really have with Overwatch at this point at its like base level. It's why I agree with Packing on a lot of his coaching styles, and it's very self-serving for me to say like, Packington, the head coach of Valiant, he agrees with me so much, like he's just so smart because I'm smart. But like the reality is I do think there's just a ceiling that can be reached because of the current amount of heroes and their overlaps and their roles of where a meta can currently evolve in Overwatch. You can't really get past double shield, Ryan Diva, Ryan Zarya, dive, like that's it. That's really about what we got. Like you have some people that we swap in and out, but that's pretty much the complexities of your composition at like the base, most axiomatic level. And hero pools just, all it does is just really changes sort of the specifics that fit into those archetypes, and or archetypes. That's really all that fits.
But
in
I mean,
there.
that's the same as in most MOBAs, right? Like that's the compositions that you have as you sort of lock off roles, which we did with 222, and like in League of Legends, they just because remember like AD carry junglers didn't exist when League started, and so they basically lock the roles and then balance to those roles, and it does create certain sort of principal structures, like you're saying. We have it's the same shit in MOBAs, like poke comps, team fight comps, split pushing comps, like different ways to play the game, but they are sort of fundamental, and players figured out over time how to sort of play all of these different kinds of compositions at a base level and be flexible within that structure, which I think is very good, because it sets sort of your goal should be, in my opinion, as an esport, because part of the draw is star building, is that you should be setting the ground rules so that players know what their job is. And once they have a job, then we can evaluate them as to how good they are at that job, because everyone knows what the job is in the first place. And I think that was one of the core problems that Overwatch had, is that we didn't even know what by the time we were having like support players play Sombra, it's like, what the fuck is your job anymore, right? Like,
yes.
that's not good for longevity of professional players, because support player, many of them were just like, I can't do this thing that you're asking me to do, or DPS players were like, Carpe's like, I can't play Zarya, but why losing a player like Carpe would suck for everybody. So I do think that if you can get the cadence down, so you have a big balance patch, possibly with small tuning at 2 weeks, right? So it's not going to disrupt the team that's doing well on that patch. So you set a hero pool, you do a big balance patch, and then you say, okay, teams, you got 3 weeks before the playoffs, deal with this. Now, after 2 weeks, we might do a little bit of tuning if something seems kind of weird. Then we have the playoffs, and then after that, here comes the next map pool, hero pool, and big balance patch. To me, that sets the right expectation.
It's basically like stages with like a much higher cadence and like actually doing like a big patch. Because in season 2, there weren't actually real big patches. They just like buffed Reaper and like Doomfist and Junkrat up. Like they didn't actually patch the game, it felt like, but like basically what you're talking about is like having an actual set of or like an actual expectation of when things will change, which is, I think, would be good for everybody.
It's also good on a base level too, when even your casual audience knows that there's going to be changes that come, because you always you have to throw stuff in for the casual audience too, because all games at the end of the day, all games survive based off their player base,
off of the lore.
Off of the lore.
Except for Counter-Strike,
exactly,
but it's unique.
There's a reason why TF2 still exists, There's a reason why it's still there, and it's because people love the characters. I mean, the gameplay is also very important, but like characters do build. There is something to be said about building that, but also
that's why CS fans are there, dude. They're just like all about they're all about the terrorists and the counter terrorists,
I'm talking more about like actual content and updates, that's not so much actual lore, but the content.
You were talking 100% about the lore. I know.
I love the
P
right side and the CT side and lore. Like that sort of shit is so dope. But it's also why games like Counter-Strike, and I think it leads into like Monte, how you said that we need to have roles or like expectations. It's why it's like that really classic like schoolroom quote that everyone throws around on everything, is like brevity is the soul of wit, but it applies to everything, right? Like even games and esports, the more simple and streamlined you can generally make it, the better it becomes, I think, generally, because then it starts leading more into execution versus like just guessing what it's not, because once you have so much complexity, it's no longer really oftentimes about strategy or player skill. It sort of becomes more of like this, like I need IBM Watson over here finding the ideal comp and running the transmutations versus actually improving players, improving teams, and finding good execution. Then it's all about the meta or the composition versus the actual game, like it becomes very, very different. And I think that's why games like CS are so successful. And also, regardless of your opinions on Valorant, I know you have many opinions on Valorant, Monty. I also have opinions on Valorant, a lot of them, but it's still at its game pretty simple at its base. And so it will find success because it is easy at a broadcast level to view and for viewers to understand. And it is also focused on players and teams executing versus solving versus going into the lab and figuring out the exact formula for success. It's more about going into the lab and actually working on yourselves as individuals and as players and as a team.
Yeah, I do think that my problem with Valorant is that it adds too many layers of abstraction to a tactical shooter, and I don't think that it is possible for it to overtake Counter-Strike, because first off, the market of FPS is like super flooded. So I just don't see it having the same level of ability to control a scene in the way that League of Legends did in MOBAs when it was released. And also, I just think it's just more like, even if it's not that I dislike the game, and I think it will be successful as an esport, but it doesn't have the sort of simple beauty that Counter-Strike does, and the approachability, because you keep the more you add like fantasy abilities to something, the burden of knowledge to like watch that game just kind of like goes up and up and up and up and up. And League of Legends, you could argue, is a very complicated game with tons of layers of abstraction, but the difference is that it has the biggest player base in the world. And so even though the conversion rate, as in the number of players, the percent of players that watch esports versus those that play, is the conversion rate for League is really not good. But because there's just so many people, it doesn't matter, right? Yeah. Whereas like Counter-Strike has a significantly smaller player base, but the conversion is like really good. And also Counter-Strike, the conversion of people who don't even play the game who watch it is insane. So it's just, you have to play this balancing act between, are you trying to make an esport that you hope people who don't play the game will watch, or are you trying to get the largest number of people to play the game who will then watch it, right? It's
which is also why the 2-2 system, I think, was really ideal for Overwatch at the end of the day, because you need to have a formula that viewers can tune in and expect and players that come and approach the game, and coaches. Like everyone, there can't just be this wild fluctuating system of like I enter a maze and it's like the cube where everything is shifting and I have to work my way through the maze to figure out the game. It has to be formulaic to a point, because now everyone knows what to expect going in.
Right, and I think a good example of this too is like the best example these days is Fortnite, which has an absolutely stunning player base, but is unwatchable from an esports perspective. Which sucks, because like I think the game has a very high skill ceiling in that like building is mechanically extremely impressive, but unfortunately Fortnite's problem is that the most impressive parts about Fortnite skill make it completely unwatchable. Like, that's tragic. That's like a tragic mechanic to have in your game. And it's fun because people like watching their individual streamers. But when we talk about esports, the world we're entering into now is this a game where it's fun to watch Dr. Disrespect play in a tournament as just a streamer? Or is this a game where I'm going to watch a produced esports broadcast, and that is the primary driver of viewership? And that's the question for me that needs to be answered with Valorant. I think it'll probably be, an esport in that way. But until you prove to me that it's not Fortnite, I can't really get on board.
Yeah. I think something that's important for this season to direct us back to Overwatch a bit too, because we'll get in a wild tangent again, which is fun because it's really nice to explore those topics. But and also, I think, Monte, you're gonna have a really great perspective on this question because it's for all the coaches here. And like, I don't have a coaching background, even though people have asked me to do it, because as someone that wasn't once a player, the concept of dealing with esports players horrifies me, and I don't want to have to deal with them ever on a coaching level. Is that for you, Packing, Harsha, and also Monte, since you have a coaching background too, is that for this sort of structure with this hero pool style system and even just beyond, do you feel like strengthening play, and Packing, I know your answer on this because we went into this in my stream the other day with Sure4, and so this is what's prompted that, is that should coaches be focused on for a season like this with these hero pools, even if they get changed to 2-week hero pools in a tournament style system, right? Is it more important to work on player synergy and keeping their mentals strong and engaged and their spirits high and the synergy high, versus getting into the nitty gritty of like, this is how you play this composition, this is how these rotations are going to happen? Like, for me, I've always felt that a very effective coach is one, especially for the current state of Overwatch, is one that keeps players on track and keeps their mentals strong and their drive strong, as opposed to just like, here's how you're going to play the game. And like, this is and we're going to have success if we just get this, all the fundamental, not the fundamentals, but like, these complex strategies down.
I think especially with how frequently things change in like current Overwatch, I think it's like, I think both are important aspects to coaching, but I think more and more like keeping everybody on track and like making sure that practice is like productive, and then making sure that players' mentals are good and stuff like that. I think that's just become more and more important in like current Overwatch. Like, I think to some degree you can't be like an Overwatch coach without having at least like a good grasp on like how the game is played, like on like how the comps are played, and like how you need to approach like certain things in the game. But I think also, especially with like COVID and everybody being locked up, like I think that just making sure that like having like the structural coaching is just a lot more important these days than like being like getting into the nitty gritty, because like there are teams where players are just losing motivation, and then like all of a sudden you have like your best assets like can't play or like can't perform well. And I think that like I think just having a good structure is just so important in like current Overwatch or like the state of things in the world.
Yeah, and I'm pretty much on the in the same boat as like I've always said it. I tell my players all the time. I mean, it's why we didn't really see two of our DPS players play. This entire stage is like we need to put the people first, and we need to put their mentality first. And like, what kind of a person would I be, or what kind of a coach would I be if I was like, oh well, you're having a hard time dealing with this stuff, or you really can't focus, or you're struggling right now. Like, no, like fuck you, you're playing anyway. Like what kind of person would I be? And there's legitimately people who do that.
Yeah.
Because they're like, no, we need to do this. This is the only way we can win. This player needs to play. And I just think that's absolutely insane. Like, if you can find success with one set of players, you can find it with another. If they're mentally engaged, if they're mentally healthy, then they're going to be successful, and your team's going to be successful. And if they're not, you can have the most talented roster in the world, but how much are they going to retain? How well are they going to play if they can't stand the side of the game, or they can't stand the side of their teammates or their coaches or anything? It's all about the trust. It's all about the the personal health, the well-being, the mental health, especially now, because we've all got cabin fever. I mean, it's it's crazy. So yeah, I 100% agree. It's all about the mentality. If we could get the mentality first, the other stuff could come with it, and come later. And especially in a world with hero pools, kind of works out even better that way. So
I think it's just a question of coaching in general, and I think that coaching is such a shitty part of esports in every esport, basically. I think it's something that needs the most development across everything. And I didn't mention this earlier, but something to Packing's point and the kind of way that he's changed the practice regimen within his team is that League of Legends, for example, the LCS teams have now gone down to 1 best of 5 a day for scrims. Yeah. So we've actually seen a pretty significant decrease over the last 5 years in scrim time, and an increase in trying to be more effective in how that scrim time is utilized and the review sessions around that, as well as building in more things. For example, Cloud9, they go to the gym, like they have a personal trainer come to the gym at the team house every day, and they get up and do that. And they have a former Navy SEAL who's doing like psychological training with them and performance training. So I think that they've switched over to this more style of focused practice, and then adding in additional beneficial elements. And I think that that's important in general. And I think that that's why another reason why I'm an advocate of having these sort of like localized studios, or creating these sort of OWL hubs, is that it allows teams to, treat their players better. And I think that'll just increase performance and give us better matches and a more robust professional scene in general. But coaching is it's really not very well developed in esports as a whole. And I will say, like, as an interesting fact, I think on average, OWL coaches are better than CSGO coaches. I think CSGO's coaching scene is a disaster. But
isn't CS primarily just made of old players that have just moved and transitioned to coaches roles?
It's also the fact that it's very...
I think the buddy style is hard for develop any sort of authority.
I mean, yes. And this is also the fact that CSGO, when you're on the road for 200 days a year to all these different individual tournaments, meaningful practice is difficult to acquire in Counter-Strike as a game because of the travel schedule and because of the way the circuit is designed. And so therefore, coaches' abilities to affect things are more limited because the ability to practice well is not great. And I think the why we see such a great level of CSGO play is because some of these guys have been playing on these same maps for 10 years. So they just, there isn't as much that's changing about the game. So the skills, I think, carry through better. But this is like an entirely different discussion, which would be a great topic for another show. Is like, how do we coach in different esports and get a coach on from League, a coach on from OWL, and a coach on from CSGO? Probably be fascinating. But yeah, I think overall the coaching issue is moving towards getting solved. But again, part of the core issue for any coach is what is the function of a coach within a format, and what is a function of a coach when you're with what you're testing for, which is why Packing has said he had to change the structure of his team's practice to reflect the structure of the league when versatility became the key attribute for his players. And I think that's smart. But also, I don't think that coaches should have to do that, because in the same way that it sort of eliminates players, like specialist players, it also eliminates specialist coaching or that kind of coaching style, which I find, not great for longevity of any esport.
Agree. Yeah, we had a saying in the Marine Corps. It was Semper Gumby. It was always flexible, right? That's kind of something that I think is like extremely important with coaching and like to I've been involved with Counter-Strike. I've been involved with Overwatch. I've seen how different things work, and to me, coaching Overwatch is it's the most difficult game out of any of the games I've ever experienced, ever watched, ever sat in on and listened to other coaches talk about League of Legends stuff or COD or Counter-Strike. Like the game is so complex and there's so many moving parts, and the communication structure is way different, and it's so fast paced. There's so much to do. So something that like we've really prided ourselves on like working on here is just making sure that like we're able to take those fundamentals and like Stoop and Reprise and the guys who work here. It's like even if it's not coming back to Overwatch, if it's going to a different game, by having extremely good fundamentals as coaches, and understanding how to coach rather than just that inherent game knowledge right off the bat. Because I think it'll be funny, maybe I'll be wrong about this, but I think in 10 years from now, coaching is going to be, the game's not going to matter as much. If you're a good coach, you're going to be able to be a good coach.
I hope so.
Like that's, I sure hope so too, because that's what the games. It's crazy that all these teams and they hire these people that like on paper would seem to be very knowledgeable about the game, but have no idea of how coaching actually works. And you could be as smart as you want, but if you don't know how to deal in people, if you don't know how to handle people, if you're not able to put a structure in place and get people to believe in you and follow you and buy into a vision, it doesn't matter how smart you are. And it all starts with that, and the intelligence can come, and I think that's kind of one of the reasons why a lot of these games find a lot of problems with coaching, or not having a lot of success, even if they have really good rosters, because structure is really important. Yes, game knowledge and intelligence is really important as well, but when you have players like in Counter-Strike, like you said, who play the game for 20 years, or you have Overwatch League players who are absolutely insane at a role, why, like, sometimes it's really confusing to me, because it's like you have like a guy like a Lastro, who's like, in my opinion, a really good flex support, and like we'll be talking about positioning, and like I'll have my ideas on what I think is really good, and I want to share those, but he does it every single day. He's in there, he has the feel of how the game is going to play, how everything interacts based off that, and there might be a theoretical right answer, and there might be an actual right in-game answer for how it works. So it's like being able to play off each other and understand those kind of nuances and aspects in the game and stuff too. And there's a lot of dictatorish people that are like, no, we like the strat, you need to be here, this is what needs to happen. But with Overwatch, being holistic, being able to find all of these solutions and find ways to make the players reach those solutions. I think if other esports kind of adapt that, it'll be a lot better for them too. So I don't know.
I think that and what I've said for years is that we just don't have enough people of an age who are head coach candidates. And I think one of the advantages that Korea had for a long time was old Brood War pros who understood what an effective system was, who are in their 30s and 40s now, who are able to become head coaches. And we saw this frequently in League of Legends. And even though it wasn't about game knowledge, it was about practice structure, solving interpersonal issues. What you do is you just hire strategic coaches who know the game super well, and then you just manage those people. And the head coach is a player, practice, and strategic coach manager, effectively. But those people, we didn't have them in the West because we hadn't gone through an entire 15-year cycle of another esport for those people to come out of. And now we're starting to see that more, which is exciting. I think it's very exciting. And so I think that, as you say, those are the people that are going to transition well into new esports, and they don't have to have the deepest game knowledge as long as they have people on their staff who do.
And that's something like I always told, like I like to think I'm smart at the game, but
you can think that if you want, Pack.
But what I always said is like my goal is to enable my coaches to effectively teach the players what they need to teach. My goal is not to teach the players, not to work with the players individually every single day. My goal is to make sure that the vision that I have in my head is achieved, and that the coaches are enabled and they're in a place to enable the players. And if you do that as a coach, then your team will be successful. And I do truly believe that. It doesn't matter what game it's across, right? It's all about enabling people to be successful. So
yeah, I was just interested to see how the structures, and since you both gave your answers, because I felt like it'd always been a long time topic, but especially with this sort of situation where all the teams are now relegated to home and the entire structure has changed, and we still have ongoing, all sorts of ongoing issues with all sorts of various other things. It's just like, it feels like the coaching job has continued to evolve within Overwatch League at a different rate than it has in other games. And there are always going to be players that I think, and this is why the concept of coaching in esports is so unbelievably awful to me at times, and why I'm always like please get this away. Like, no, absolutely not. It's because you always are going to have pig-headed players that are going to be like, well, you're just not very good at your job, and like you just don't know how to teach the game. And like because there is no denying it, Monte. There is a lot of esports coaching that is falling flat, but there's also the fact that we have a bunch of young, not really socially developed players, and the fact to be a player in anything professionally requires a lot of drive and a lot of talent, and that drive clashes with systems very heavily. And if you don't have a system that's very strong and people that can lead it, then it just is disastrous.
I mean, that's another issue though when it comes to the fact that in every esport, many of the professional players do not have a history of being coached. Like if I'm in Little League or Pop Warner, I've been coached since I was 10, right? Yeah. So there's an inherent respect for authority and part of a system. Like what you get in esports is a bunch of 17-year-old shitters who have never actually been, like they have been born in the fires of internet voice chat and they have never had to submit to any kind of team structure or authority figure and are toxic little pieces of shit. And like when they first encounter a coach, a lot of times their initial reaction is, you don't know as much about the game as I do. That's their perception at least. And so I'm just not going to do what you say. And I'm going to be an asshole to my teammates and everything like that. So I think, fundamentally, one of the best things that's going to evolve coaching is actually the creation of youth leagues who have coaches at that level so that they actually get used to that environment.
Yeah, it's actually funny you said that too, because in the off season I did a lot of public speaking stuff at universities, and a couple of them had a bunch of like high school students and teachers who were trying to coach at a high school, like at the high school level, to start kind of trying to develop that in Northeast Pennsylvania. And like I thought it was like super interesting, and I still talk to the people and kind of give them advice and find out what the problems they're running into are and try to help them out, because it's, I mean, I really like strongly agree with that the better the better off the system is from the ground up, like if it's the youth or I guess high school is still kind of youth, but or high school or collegiate, like it makes things a lot easier. And that's why you still see some of the problems these guys have in traditional sports making the jump from being 19, 20, 21 going into the NFL and getting, a fat paycheck, and then, going out to some strip club with a gun in their pocket, like it's,
and then accidentally shooting themselves. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, our problems are mild compared to the domestic abuse and gun problems that some other esports have. Although the Dream Casper thing was very bad, so I don't know. Different problems. Different problems. Different problems.
Very different problems.
But
Very
yeah,
different problems.
I think the better that structure could be from the ground up. It'll just make everything better fundamentally throughout, and it'll make coaching, a lot. I shouldn't say a lot easier, but it should make it less problematic, because that's what a conversation I have with every single player that comes to plan a team that I coach is. I literally say to them, "You will probably hate me at some point during this year, but that's okay. Like it's not about if you really like me or you hate me or whatever. It's about us being successful. And once they see that happening, and once they buy into that vision, then it happens. But it's it's not easy. It shouldn't be easy for the players to work under coaches. It shouldn't be easy for the coaches to coach the players.
I mean, I think like the problem is that it always takes the coach to win over the players no matter what in any sport, right? Like that's just a process that happens and it's part of the dynamic. But the problem with esports is that the coach has to convince the players that coaching is necessary and then win them over, which is just a stupid and unnecessary step that has to happen. Also, it has to be said that many of these people who, play video games, not all of them, but typically the people who live that lifestyle of sitting alone at their computer to get that good, maybe not the most developed social skills as human beings. And I think that's changing, as online gaming shifts to being more socially normal, and we have an increased number. Like in Korea, it's different because there's PC cafes on every block and you're going out as a social activity with your friends. And that's starting to happen more in America, but I do think it has to be more socialized, let's say, in the West for that to be effective.
Sure.
No, definitely so. 100%.
Well, I think we've gone off the topic of the league, but I do think that we've had a really good overall conversation of, where hero pools are, what some of the options are about Overwatch League in terms of formatting in the future, and some of the issues. So, I mean, we've been here for 2.5 hours, so we'll call it, I think, this time, unless you guys have any other final topics that you think are important to discuss.
I don't have anything.
Nothing for me.
Nope.
Good to go.
I'm all pumped out.
If you guys are curious and you're Overwatch fans, do watch the last episode about CDL if you're interested in sort of how that was formed and the difference in formats there. Also, tomorrow, what might be interesting to Overwatch League fans is at the same time this show started, so 2.5 hours previously, we're going to be doing a different version of Essential Esports. This time, we're going to be talking about the LCS Players Union in League of Legends, and we're also going to be talking about how that is affecting other esports. So one thing that Overwatch could definitely do with is a players association or a players union. They are two different things, to be fair. But the players association, the rep from that is going to be on in a Bryce Blum, esports law on Twitter, who represents many of the teams. It's going to be an interesting discussion about how that fits into the broader esports landscape. So if you're curious about that, come back tomorrow, watch the VOD, Cloud9 YouTube channel, wherever you guys are going to go to see that. So anyway, thank you guys for joining me for this very long call. Have a nice couple of weeks off.
Oh, pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Appreciate it, guys. We'll leave you with that.